Daisy is her name. Every morning, she carefully sweeps the entrance of the manor until it is perfectly clean before giving the flower beds a generous amount of water. These are part of her daily responsibilities as a maid serving the Weatherwoods family. In truth, watering the flowers should normally be handled by the gardener, but this household is far from ordinary. Because the master's finances are in such poor condition, the 3 servants have no choice but to share every duty without worrying about job titles. Before long, 3 men arrive outside the front gate and begin calling for someone inside. One of them remarks to Baron Feathergale that it appears nobody can hear them. At that moment, the head maid notices the visitors and walks toward the gate. She immediately recognizes the Baron and wonders if he has come once again. He jokingly complains that she is making him sound rather embarrassing. Remaining composed, the head maid reminds him that the manor is not for sale and politely asks him to return home. As she turns to leave, the Baron deliberately bumps into her shoulder before accusing her of being insolent. He explains that purchasing the estate is not the reason for his visit today. Instead, he insists that he has come to meet the new Viscount Weatherwoods. The head maid apologizes and informs him that the master is currently away. The Baron points out that this is already the 3rd time he has been given the same explanation within a single month. From everything he has observed, only 3 servants ever appear around the estate. He adds that the villagers have already begun referring to the place as the Ghost Manor before loudly complaining that such a magnificent residence has been left to deteriorate into its current miserable condition. The head maid questions the purpose behind such disrespectful behavior, but the Baron only raises his voice even further. He declares that he simply cannot tolerate the sight any longer and claims that if his beloved friend, the previous Viscount, could witness the manor in such a ruined state, he would be completely heartbroken. Hearing those words causes the head maid to reflect silently that 4 years have already passed since the former master lost his life in the magic war, and she finds herself beginning to miss him once again. After gathering herself, the head maid politely requests that the Baron leave the property. Instead of listening, he notices Daisy standing nearby and orders her to stop idling around before demanding that she come closer. He questions how long the new Viscount Weatherwoods has supposedly been absent from the manor, wondering whether it has been 2 years or perhaps 3. Daisy calmly answers that the Viscount has never been away. The Baron then asks whether the Viscount's health has become so poor that he cannot even step outside. Daisy responds that he is perfectly healthy. The Baron explains that the former master, whom he considered his closest friend, entrusted him with looking after the new Viscount Weatherwoods, and because of that responsibility he wishes to know whether everything is truly fine. Daisy simply assures him that there is nothing wrong. Her calm responses only make the Baron lose his temper. Furious, he shouts that a mere maid has become far too insolent and claims that she has forgotten her proper place. As he raises his hand with the intention of striking her across the face, Daisy reacts first and delivers a powerful slap that leaves him stunned. The head maid immediately reminds Daisy that a proper maid must always remain patient, adding that troublesome raccoons like these can be dealt with without Daisy needing to lift a finger. While the Baron is still frozen in shock, the 2 men accompanying him remark that she appears capable of fighting as they move forward to attack. Before they can do anything, Daisy strikes both of them squarely in the face with clean punches. She then calmly insists that she is, in fact, being patient. The head maid questions whether Daisy truly expects anyone to believe that after what just happened. Daisy casually explains that only her right hand is going through a rebellious phase and promises that she will discipline it later while working in the garden. As she prepares to drag the unconscious men away, Daisy innocently asks whether she should simply bury them somewhere nearby. Horrified, the head maid tells her not to say such terrifying things and instructs her to leave the 3 men outside the front of the manor instead. Daisy then suggests another idea, asking whether cutting off their heads and hanging them up as a warning would be better. The story remarks that another name for being a maid is enduring hardship, and despite everything that had happened, the incident ultimately ended with Baron Feathergale filing a lawsuit against Daisy for assault and intimidation. A few days earlier, while standing in line and waiting for her turn, Daisy hears her number, 38, being called and is told to come inside. The woman conducting the interview welcomes her warmly and cannot help thinking that Daisy is remarkably beautiful. She then asks for her name, and Daisy introduces herself as Daisy Fager. The interviewer pauses for a moment after hearing the surname, pointing out that Fager is also the family name of Andard Fager, the legendary hero of the Magic War. Without hesitation, Daisy explains that it is simply a common surname. The woman moves on to ask about her family, and Daisy answers that she has one younger brother. Next, Her height is recorded as 170 centimeters, prompting the interviewer to remark that she is unusually tall for a woman and that this would actually be an advantage for the position she has applied for. After writing down the information, the interviewer asks what motivated Daisy to become a maid. Daisy gives a short and straightforward answer: money. Satisfied with the reply, the interviewer asks one final question, wanting to know what kind of employer Daisy hopes to work for. Daisy explains that she is searching for a mansion so merciless and exhausting that 2 servants could work there without even noticing if one of them died. The interviewer interprets this as Daisy wanting an employer who works their servants to the bone, and Daisy confirms that such a place would be perfect for achieving her goal. Hearing that, the interviewer suddenly rises from her seat and excitedly tells Daisy that she is incredibly fortunate because opportunities like this rarely come so quickly. She explains that the estate is located in the empire's busiest district and belongs to one of its most distinguished noble families. According to her, serving in such a household is considered a great honor. As she hands Daisy her maid uniform, she gives her a single piece of advice to survive at least 1 week before deciding to quit. Later, Daisy arrives at the mansion and stops in front of its enormous gate. Looking at the gloomy estate, she thinks it resembles the kind of place where demons could emerge at any moment. Even the doorbell appears to be broken. Unsure of what to do, she decides to wait patiently for someone to notice her. An entire hour passes without anyone appearing. Growing impatient, Daisy grabs the gate with both hands and begins shaking it forcefully, wondering whether someone would finally come if she made enough noise. The loud rattling eventually gets someone's attention, and the head maid comes outside, apologizing for keeping her waiting so long. The head maid asks whether she is Daisy Fager, the new maid, before introducing herself as the head maid of the Weatherwood estate. Before leading Daisy inside, she explains that maids are normally forbidden from entering through the front gate or the main entrance. However, this estate is an exception, and Daisy is free to use both. The only request she makes is that Daisy never shake the gate like that again. The head maid then asks Daisy if she brought any luggage with her. Daisy casually answers, "Yeah," but the head maid immediately corrects her, telling her not to say yeah and instead respond properly with, "No, I don't." Realizing her mistake, Daisy quickly fixes her reply and politely says that she does not. The head maid begins explaining the rules of the estate. She tells Daisy that the owner of the mansion is Viscount Weatherwoods and that he is the only member of the household currently living there. As for the staff, there are only 3 people: the head maid, Daisy herself, and a cook who also takes care of the garden and is expected to arrive in 4 days. She continues by explaining that wages are paid on the first day of every month. Their daily schedule begins at 6 in the morning and finishes at 7 in the evening. While showing Daisy around the mansion, she leads her to her bedroom, mentioning that it is probably the largest maid's room anyone could hope for. Before leaving, the head maid instructs Daisy to change into her work clothes and meet her at the entrance hall on the first floor shortly afterward. However, before she goes, she gives Daisy one final and very important warning. There is only one rule she must never break under no circumstances: is she to enter the master's room. If anyone ever asks where the Viscount is, she should simply answer that he is out. Daisy quietly nods in response, but the head maid immediately reminds her that silently nodding is not an acceptable answer. Daisy quickly responds with a proper yes. Once she is finally alone, Daisy throws herself onto the bed and thinks that, at the very least, the place seems livable. Still, she reminds herself why she came. She has 3 years to locate those items without attracting anyone's suspicion. If she fails before that deadline, she knows she will lose her life. Not long after beginning her work, Daisy starts thinking that she might actually die anyway because this mansion is completely insane. While they work together, the head maid comments that everything moves much faster with 2 people. She praises Daisy's incredible stamina and sharp thinking, saying that every coin spent bringing her here was well worth it. Hearing that, Daisy secretly thinks that it explains why the woman who interviewed her had looked at her like she was some priceless golden pig. As the head maid glances out the window and notices the time, she announces that today's work is over and that they should go eat dinner. The moment Daisy tastes the meal, she makes a terrible expression and blurts out that it tastes awful. The head maid immediately tells her to keep thoughts like that to herself since the person who cooked the meal is not even here. After a brief pause, the head maid honestly admits that she has watched countless maids come and go while serving the Weatherwoods family, but someone like Daisy is unlike anyone she has ever met. Curious, she asks what led Daisy to become a maid in the first place. Daisy falls silent as she reflects on the question, wondering herself how her life ended up bringing her to this job. Noticing her hesitation, the head maid gently says that if the question is difficult to answer, she does not have to force herself. After all, everyone has a past, and everyone carries at least one painful burden in their heart. Deep down, Daisy thinks that she had almost answered honestly that she became a maid because she had no home and no money. But she decides against revealing that she is completely broke, fearing they would only work her even harder if they knew. The following days pass in a blur. After dinner that night, she closes her eyes for what feels like only a second, yet somehow morning has already arrived. The next day is no different. Every hour of non-stop labor leaves her feeling more like livestock than a person. Then, on the third night after enduring those exhausting days, while she is fast asleep, he finally appears. The man suddenly drives a knife into the pillow, stopping just inches from Daisy's face, and orders her to wake up. He coldly tells her that if she wants to stay alive, she must obey everything he says. From this moment onward, her job is to act as a spy by keeping watch over Viscount Weatherwoods, tracking his movements, and reporting them on a regular basis. Instead of panicking, Daisy calmly asks him a single question why. Her response catches the man completely off guard. Looking confused, he asks if she is still half asleep and starts repeating that if she wants to live. But before he can finish speaking, Daisy suddenly covers his mouth with her hand and pulls something out from inside. Looking at the object, she calmly says that her suspicion was correct. It is a mercy pill, a suicide capsule commonly used by members of the Assassination and Intelligence Guild. The startled man turns around, only to find Daisy already standing behind him with a cloth in her hand. Completely unfazed, she asks him once again the same question. Why? The man's body immediately begins trembling. Sometime later, after he has been completely restrained with ropes, he stares at Daisy in disbelief and says that she is clearly no ordinary maid. He demands to know who she really is. Ignoring his question entirely, Daisy simply repeats her own. Why? With no other choice, the man begins explaining. He says that he only accepted an assignment given to his guild. As for the reason Viscount Weatherwoods needed to be monitored, he claims he was never told. Daisy then asks who the client behind the request is. The man admits that he has no idea. She follows up by asking how many spies had been sent before her. Based on what he heard, he answers that there had been at least 3 before. Hearing that, Daisy suddenly realizes something. She had always thought it was strange. Although the work at the mansion was exhausting, it was never difficult enough to explain why maid after maid kept disappearing one after another. She immediately asks what became of the previous maids. The man says he honestly does not know. His only responsibility was to make each maid swear an oath of obedience. Anything that happened after that was outside his involvement. At that moment, Daisy understands everything. The magical item he carried was used to force those maids into taking that oath. An oath is a forbidden form of magic that uses a person's soul as collateral. Anyone who violates it pays the ultimate price. Their soul is destroyed, and death follows soon after. This likely means the maids never actually ran away. They were killed. Daisy cannot understand what could possibly be so important about Viscount Weatherwoods that someone would go to such extremes just to uncover it. The man frantically pleads for mercy, explaining that after even failing to take his own life, he will have no choice but to live as a fugitive forever. He promises that he will never show himself before Daisy again and vows that he will never reveal a single word about her. If it would ease her mind, he is even willing to swear an oath of absolute obedience. Without warning, Daisy slaps him across the face and tells him that none of that is necessary. For a brief moment, she considers killing him herself, but then the head maid's words resurface in her mind. She quietly turns her gaze toward the window, lost in deep thought. The following morning, the head maid is enjoying a cup of tea in the kitchen when she remarks that it is unusually noisy outside. She comments that it seems someone is moving into the neighboring house. She finds it rather surprising since it has not been very long since the Esla family moved away, yet another household is already taking their place. Daisy is puzzled because she was certain the house had been left vacant. A moment later, Daisy suddenly heads toward the door, prompting the head maid to ask where she is going. Daisy casually answers, urine. The head maid immediately corrects her, telling her to use a more proper expression for something like that. Daisy admits that she spoke carelessly. She quickly rushes outside to see what is happening and is surprised to find the assassin simply sitting there doing nothing. She cannot understand why he is behaving so casually. Her attention then shifts to another man standing nearby, making her wonder who he is. It only takes her a moment to realize that In a neighborhood like this, he is certainly no ordinary person. Deciding she has no other option, Daisy chooses to abandon the assassin and put everything that happened the previous day completely out of her mind. Just then, the dark-haired man walks over and introduces himself. He explains that, starting today, he will be serving as both the gardener and the cook. His name is Lou, and that is how Daisy meets him for the very first time. Daisy firmly states that the new employee should be dismissed. The head maid looks confused and asks who Daisy is referring to, wondering if she means herself. Daisy quickly denies it and says she is talking about that suspicious man. The head maid asks if she is referring to Lou. Daisy nods and insists that there is no way he is an ordinary person. Everything about him is suspicious. The head maid gently tells Daisy that she should not judge someone so quickly and points out that Daisy herself is also far from ordinary. Daisy replies that, even so, she is nowhere near the same level as Lou. In her opinion, simply looking at him is enough to make anyone suspicious. How could someone possibly be that unbelievably attractive? Even his unusual blue hair somehow looks elegant because it matches his flawless facial features perfectly. His golden eyes shine like sunlight reflecting across the sea, and even his lazy, half-lit gaze leaves a powerful impression. His appearance alone is so stunning that it is mentally overwhelming just to look at him. His personality is no less unusual. Lou politely introduces himself before asking how he should address the head maid. She tells him that calling her head maid is perfectly fine. Lou casually confirms that she is also responsible for cooking and taking care of the garden. Feeling a little awkward, the head maid says yes and apologizes, explaining that she keeps saying the same thing to everyone. Lu replies without hesitation that he understands why it would be difficult to believe someone as dazzlingly handsome as himself would choose to cook for a nearly ruined mansion or look after a garden that resembles a wasteland. Even so, he tells her to accept it because that is simply the truth. Daisy is left speechless. Not only did he openly call the estate a dying mansion, but he even insulted the garden. Lou then turns his attention toward Daisy and asks about her. The head maid explains that she is the housemaid. Lou responds by asking whether her name is actually Maid and remarks that it is certainly an original name. He then smiles and says he looks forward to working together with Miss Maid the maid. The head maid quietly whispers to Daisy that they should observe him for a while, although she personally believes the only suspicious thing about him is how incredibly handsome he is. Inside her mind, Daisy thinks the head maid is being much too trusting. Earlier that very morning, the assassin she captured had already been standing beside Lou. On top of that, Lou lives directly opposite the Weatherwoods estate. To Daisy, that can only mean one thing: he has to be a spy assigned to keep watch over Viscount Weatherwoods. The head maid interrupts Daisy's thoughts and tells her to stop overthinking everything and wipe the handprints off the window instead. Even while cleaning, Daisy cannot shake the feeling that Lou and the assassin are obviously connected and working together. Unfortunately, she cannot reveal why she is so certain. If she explains how she knows all of this, the head maid may start questioning her as well. That could easily result in Daisy being thrown out of this already bizarre household. On top of everything else, the head maid has become a complete servant to capitalism in this era. The moment Lou agreed to work for only half the usual salary and even volunteered to spend his own money restoring the neglected garden, she was completely won over by him. Daisy can't help thinking that money is a frightening thing. It makes people overlook the obvious, even when a spy could be putting their master in danger every single day. Moments like this make her feel that the only way to uncover the truth is to have a more physical discussion with that man. Out of nowhere, Lou asks if there is something she wants to tell him. Without hesitation, Daisy asks him who he really is. Lu casually replies that if she is asking about his name, he already introduced himself. His name is Lou, and he even calls her Miss Maid the maid. Daisy explains that she is not asking for his name at all. She wants to know who he truly is. With a teasing smile, Lou asks if she is saying she wants to get to know him on a deeper level. He jokes that they have not reached that stage of their relationship yet. Daisy tells him to stop slithering around the question like a snake and answer her honestly. She demands to know who he is and what his real reason for coming here is. Lou slowly leans in and whispers into her ear that he is actually her admirer. He brings up how she caught someone the previous night and even tied the man up inside his own house. Watching her confidently imprison a complete stranger was, in his opinion, incredibly impressive. Daisy immediately asks whether that incident is the reason he entered the mansion. Before she can say anything else, Lou suddenly raises his voice and calls for the head maid. Loud enough for everyone to hear, He complains that Miss Maid the maid has stopped working because she is too busy flirting with him. Daisy instantly realizes that he is not only suspicious but also petty enough to involve the head maid just to make things difficult for her. The head maid arrives and says she thought she heard someone mention slacking off, although perhaps she imagined it. She reminds Daisy that only those who work diligently deserve to enjoy a satisfying dinner later. After hearing those words, Daisy throws herself into her work. Even so, when evening comes, the meal waiting for her is just as bland and flavorless as ever. The story then shifts back to the present. Someone asks what became of the lawsuit. The answer is simple. In the end, the Baron decided to withdraw all of the charges. However, the investigation into Daisy Fager's true identity continued separately from the original case. Lu calmly says there is no point worrying because the matter is no longer in their hands. Daisy admits that plenty of things are bothering her, but one concern stands above the rest. She cannot stop wondering whether Lu murdered the Baron and secretly buried the body somewhere. Lu tells Miss Daisy that she really should not make comments like that in public. He then explains that, in situations like these, people normally express their gratitude by saying something along the lines of, "You came to my aid today, and I will remember your kindness for as long as I live. To repay you, I shall devote myself to serving you. Please allow me to kiss the top of your foot, master." After finishing his dramatic speech, he cheerfully asks if they should give that a try. Daisy can only think to herself that this ridiculous man has already made himself completely at home. As the two men watch Daisy and Lu walk off, one of them asks whether they are really going to let them leave without doing anything. The other responds that they have no choice. Their orders from the higher-ups were to dig into Daisy's past, regardless of what happened with the Baron. However, now that the Baron has officially dropped his accusations, there is no legal reason to continue the investigation, even if they still want to. The first man admits the entire situation feels suspicious. After all, the Baron created such a massive commotion earlier, only to suddenly back down. He wonders if there is something they are missing and remarks that Daisy could be one of the rare survivors from Queen Island. Meanwhile, Lu calls out to Daisy and points out that he still has not received a proper thank you from her. He teasingly says that she cannot possibly be less grateful than a dog, since even dogs know how to repay someone who helps them. Clearly irritated, Daisy reluctantly mutters a thank you. Lu smiles and tells her that if she truly appreciates what he did, then she should repay the favor. Daisy quickly replies that she does not have any money, but Lu explains that he is not asking for cash. Instead, he tells her that from now on she should stop acting so recklessly. Rather than rushing in with her fists, she needs to think things through before taking action. He then casually adds that if she ever ends up needing to get rid of a body, she should come to him first, asking with a straight face whether that sounds reasonable and saying it should not be difficult. Completely baffled, Daisy immediately asks why she would ever need to do something like that. Just then, the head maid hurries over and anxiously asks whether the two of them are all right. She explains that she never expected the Baron to file charges so quickly. Lu calmly assures her that, as she can see, they are both perfectly fine. The head maid goes on to explain that she believed the incident was clearly an act of self-defense and had planned to resolve the matter privately within the family. Unfortunately, the other side refused to let the issue rest and continued to push the matter relentlessly. A moment later, the head maid glances at the clock and suddenly realizes how late it has become. She quickly apologizes to Lu before asking if he would be willing to lend a hand with preparing dinner. Lu smiles and replies that if the request is coming from the head maid herself, he would be happy to help. As they head toward the kitchen together, Lu jokingly says that he will put a little of his cooking talent on display just for her. The head maid laughs and says she is looking forward to seeing what he can make. Watching them leave, Daisy grows increasingly irritated. She thinks that if things continue like this, the head maid is going to be completely fooled by Lu's charming act once again. She silently reminds herself that she cannot let her guard down. Later, after finishing the meal, Lu places a plate in front of the head maid and politely tells her to enjoy it. He explains that since the only ingredients they had were the potatoes he personally brought, he decided to prepare something simple. The instant the head maid takes a bite, her eyes light up. She declares that it is the finest meal she has eaten in years and admits it tastes so incredible that she almost feels guilty for employing him at only half wages. Without missing a beat, Lu casually remarks that if someone had not peeled the potatoes at the speed of a tortoise, he could have served this meal much sooner. Daisy immediately feels annoyed, but she cannot even argue because she knows he is telling the truth. She quietly wonders why she was incapable of peeling the potatoes any faster. Seeing how quickly Daisy is eating, the head maid gently reminds her to slow down, assuring her that no one is going to steal her food. As she continues eating, Daisy asks Lu how he managed to make such an amazing dish. She jokingly asks whether he grilled the Baron or roasted him instead before questioning why the Baron suddenly decided to withdraw all the charges. She even half-seriously wonders if Lu is secretly a noble with a title higher than the Baron's. Lu looks amused and asks why she would come to that conclusion. He then proudly begins praising himself, claiming that he is elegant, refined, wealthy, thoughtful, handsome, physically fit, kind-hearted, intelligent, and blessed with an exceptionally high opinion of himself. After boasting about himself, he casually adds that he is pleased Daisy is finally speaking in complete sentences. He tells her that she should keep talking like this from now on instead of constantly cutting herself off like a fool. Daisy silently admits that maybe she really does come across that way sometimes. At the same time, she cannot help thinking that the biggest reason she has been talking this much lately is because of Lu, and she absolutely hates that fact. As Lu slides a bowl of stew toward her, he notices the look on her face and jokingly asks whether that expression means she wants his stew as well. Without hesitating, Daisy snatches the bowl and replies that the stew has done nothing wrong. Lu lets out a small laugh before standing up. Since Miss Daisy has now claimed his portion of the stew, he says it is probably time for him to head home, adding with a grin that he will send them a bill for the overtime later. As he walks away, the head maid cheerfully reminds him not to forget to come back tomorrow. While finishing the stew, Daisy quietly admits to herself that it is undeniably delicious. Even so, something continues to bother her deep down. She simply cannot feel comfortable working alongside someone as mysterious and suspicious as Lu. After returning to her room, Daisy begins organizing her thoughts. At the moment, she has come up with two possible explanations for Lu's true identity. The first is that, just like the assassin she encountered before, Lu secretly infiltrated the estate to keep watch over Viscount Witherwoods. The second possibility is that he already knows about her hidden past and intentionally sought her out because of it. Standing by the window and staring into the distance, Daisy quietly wonders how likely that second theory really is. While Daisy is asleep, another dream unfolds. Andert! Andert! Stop this at once! That's an order from the Commander-in-Chief. Without hesitation, Andert answers that he does not need anyone's approval because this is a choice he has made himself. Farewell, Rafilo. As Andert raises his sword, Rafilo desperately cries out, begging Andert Fager to return immediately. In the next moment, Daisy suddenly wakes up, clutching her head from a painful headache. Her first thought is whether Lu already knows the truth. 14 years earlier, during the war started by the great magician Mephisto in his pursuit of immortality, the legendary hero who protected humanity was believed to be the Emperor's sword, Andert Fager. However, the reality was completely different. Andert Fager was actually Daisy herself. The reason history remembers Andert as a man is simple. After her younger brother lost his life defending their homeland, Queen Island, Daisy used an ancient spell to transform herself into a man's body. Taking her brother's name, she spent years living as Andert Fager. Even after defeating and killing Mephisto, she believed her own life had finally come to an end. Instead, 4 years later, she mysteriously returned to life in her original female body, only to discover that she had just 3 years left to live. Frustrated, Daisy thinks this situation has become impossible to tolerate. These recurring dreams keep ruining her sleep, and if she ends up oversleeping and gets dismissed from her maid job, she will be the one who suffers. Realizing she cannot ignore it any longer, she decides to question Lu directly. On her way to see him, she wonders whether she should politely knock on the wall or simply smash straight through it, since breaking it would hardly be difficult for her. Before she can do anything, Lu suddenly speaks. "Were you surprised? The master said you'd probably come around this time." Confused, Daisy asks him what he means by the master. Lu explains that the master expected her visit and told him to wait there so he could pass along a message. Daisy quietly wonders if Lu has somehow become that man's personal butler. Lu then delivers the message exactly as he was instructed. "If Miss Daisy comes looking for me, tell her she'd be better off practicing how to peel potatoes instead of wasting her time coming here." The moment she hears those words, Daisy loses her patience and immediately grabs Lu by the throat. Panicking, Lu hurriedly explains that those were not his own words, they were simply the master's message. After letting go of him, Daisy asks whether the two of them are secretly working together. Lu reminds her that she was the one who locked him up in the first place. Then, just as the master predicted, he says she really must have lost her memories or something. He goes on to explain that no one is forcing him to stay there. He is remaining there entirely of his own choice. Still unconvinced, Daisy replies that it is difficult for her to trust him while he is dressed like that. Lu acknowledges that Daisy has a point, but says he surrendered of his own free will. In his view, it is only natural for those who are weaker to yield to someone far stronger. He tells Daisy that she would not understand because the master is an exceptionally frightening individual. He then explains that the entire estate is protected by powerful, high-level magic that prevents anyone outside from seeing what is happening within its grounds. Because the guild's surveillance cannot reach him there, he chose to remain hidden and concentrate on staying alive for now. Daisy is taken aback after learning about the magical barrier surrounding the estate. Not only is the enchantment advanced enough to escape even her own detection, but the master is also capable of instilling genuine fear in an experienced assassin like Lu. At that moment, Daisy realizes that the uneasy feeling she had back then was completely justified. Ever since returning to this body, she has not even touched a sword, meaning confronting Lu on that day would have put her in serious danger. Wanting to know more, Daisy asks Lu how likely it is that his master is the mysterious client responsible for everything. Lu admits that he cannot give a definite answer because the master does not seem like someone who would rely on an assassination guild to carry out his plans. Even so, there is one thing he is certain about: the master has a clear interest in the Weatherwoods family. He also points out that the master somehow knew beforehand that Daisy would arrive, making it unlikely that he had been lying. Daisy reflects on Lu's words and concludes that his greatest concern right now is staying alive, so he has little reason to deceive her. With that in mind, she proposes an arrangement between them. They should exchange any information they manage to discover. She asks whether he would be willing to cooperate. Lu immediately questions why he should accept such an offer. In response, Daisy suggests that they meet at the same location and at the same time once every week. As the two seal the agreement with a handshake, Daisy remarks that they are now helping each other. Just then, as though an important thought suddenly crosses his mind, Lu casually asks whether she happens to know any good methods for washing blankets. While hanging freshly washed blankets on the clothesline, Daisy reflects on the surveillance she set up the previous day. Since she failed to detect anything suspicious, she concludes that things are unfolding exactly as she expected. If she wants answers, she will have to face him herself. Later, while Lu is busy watering the garden, Daisy approaches him and says she has something to give him. Without even looking, Lu instantly declines, saying he has already received more than enough love confession. Daisy stares at him in disbelief before handing him the folded piece of paper. She asks what nonsense he is talking about and calls him insufferable. Taking the paper, Lu remarks that since she went through the effort of writing it, he will read it anyway. However, he adds that he does not believe in fate or destined romance with someone he has only just met. Once he unfolds the note, he discovers that it is actually a detailed list of every reason Daisy considers him suspicious. After reading it from beginning to end, Lu comments that her level of self-consciousness is truly impressive and jokingly asks whether she stayed awake all night writing it. Daisy looks completely puzzled and asks what he means by that. She reminds him that he was the one proudly claiming to be dazzlingly handsome, graceful, noble, and incredibly rich, yet now he is accusing her of being self-conscious. Without another thought, Lu casually folds the note and slips it into his pocket before dismissively saying, "Whatever." Daisy immediately grows irritated and asks how he can brush everything aside without giving a proper response to anything she wrote. Rather than answering, Lu picks up a flower pot and places it in Daisy's hands, telling her to take it. She looks at the pot in confusion and asks what exactly he expects her to do with it. Lu tells her to grow a flower in it. He explains that the type of flower does not matter, but she must raise it from a seed and is absolutely forbidden from transplanting an already grown plant. Even more confused, Daisy asks why she suddenly has to do something like that. Lu explains that his true identity is an extraordinarily dangerous secret, so he cannot simply reveal it without receiving something in return. Compared to that secret, he says making a flower bloom is a very small price to pay. He then adds that if she does not wish to grow one, she can always pay him 500 gold instead. Daisy immediately rejects the idea, saying that even if she saved every coin from a maid's wages for 100 years, she still could not afford such a ridiculous amount. Left with no other choice, she reluctantly agrees to grow the flower and reminds him that he had better keep his promise. Lu lightly taps her on the head and says he is looking forward to seeing what kind of flower she manages to grow. Daisy instantly warns him that if he ever touches her again, she will break his hand. Just then, the head maid suddenly appears before them and calmly announces that romantic relationships between co-workers are strictly forbidden. Miss Daisy and Mr. Lu. Daisy hurriedly insists that everything is a complete misunderstanding, but the head maid simply replies that they will find out soon enough whether that is really the case. Daisy's coworker cautions her to stay alert, warning that if she gets caught, the deduction will come out of her paycheck. After that, she says there is enough work for the moment and instructs Daisy to head to the market to purchase some ingredients. On the way, Daisy reflects that if things continue like this, she might be the only person whose wages keep getting reduced. For the time being, she decides to stop looking into Lu. At this point, his behavior is nothing more than a suspicion in her mind, and he has not actually done anything that proves he is guilty. As she walks through the busy marketplace, her attention is drawn to an elderly woman selling vegetables. Both the produce on display and the woman herself appear to be in poor condition. Daisy asks to buy 7 potatoes. The old woman's face immediately brightens. Delighted to finally have a customer, she warmly thanks Daisy while handing over the potatoes and kindly asks her to visit again in the future. While looking at the potatoes, Daisy thinks that since Lu is such a skilled cook, the meal should still turn out fine even if a few of them have small sprouts. As she counts them, she notices there is 1 potato too many. Assuming the elderly woman accidentally miscounted, Daisy decides to return the extra 1. However, when she walks back toward the stall, she finds a man confronting the old woman. He demands to know whether she has earned any money that day because they have come to collect the merchant union fee she failed to pay previously. The elderly woman desperately clings to him, repeatedly explaining that she is only an old woman trying to make a living with a tiny vegetable stand and that she never intended to join any merchant union. Without warning, the man strikes her and angrily yells that if she cannot afford the fee, she should shut down her stall and leave their territory. Altogether, seeing this, Daisy steps in at once and coldly asks whether they all want to end up lying in the trash. The man notices her maid uniform and sneers at her appearance before threatening that he can make sure she will never be able to walk safely through these streets again. The elderly woman bursts into tears and desperately pleads with Daisy to stop interfering and run away before she gets hurt. Instead of backing down, Daisy instantly drives a kick straight into the man's groin before following it with a punch squarely across his face. Everyone nearby is left completely stunned by what they witness. The elderly woman sincerely thanks Daisy for helping her, and Daisy asks who those men really are. The old woman explains that they were originally formed as a vigilante group during the Magic War. However, after the conflict ended, they continued operating by forcing merchants to pay fees under the excuse of protecting the marketplace. Anyone who refuses to pay is harassed and made to suffer, just as she experienced today. After hearing the explanation, Daisy quietly acknowledges the situation, simply replying that she understands. These men seem far more dangerous than they first appeared. From what the nearby shopkeepers said after hearing about the elderly woman's situation, incidents like this have become increasingly common. Daisy finds it hard to believe. The taverns she remembers were places where people came together during the countless battles against Mephisto's safe, welcoming shelters where everyone shared news, supported one another, and found comfort. Now, however, this establishment is nothing more than a hideout for people acting like street thugs while hiding behind the name of a merchants union. Then an idea comes to her. The timing could not be better. Since she is searching for information about the artifact, these men might be exactly the people she can make use of. Later that night, Daisy quietly makes her way through the streets. She knows sneaking out after dark is exactly the kind of behavior a proper maid should never be caught doing, but she figures it is still preferable to being discovered and getting lectured afterward. A sudden chill runs through her body. She pauses for a moment, wondering whether it is only her imagination or if the night air has genuinely turned colder. When she steps inside the tavern, she immediately notices that the 2 men from earlier are nowhere in sight. Walking over to the counter, she politely asks to order a drink. Without hesitation, the bartender tells her they are closed and not serving anyone. Just then, another man walks over and stops the bartender, saying they should wait because he recognizes her. He stares at Daisy for a moment, insisting they must have crossed paths before and that her face looks strangely familiar. A second later, realization hits him. He points at her and blurts out that she is the insane maid who broke his brother's face. Remaining completely composed, Daisy answers by asking whether he is referring to that piece of trash's brother or perhaps the older piece of trash instead. The bartender instantly pulls out a gun and aims it directly at her. He remarks that it is unfortunate because she is actually quite attractive, then warns her to keep her mouth shut unless she wants a bullet through her head. Before he can even finish the threat, Daisy snatches the gun from his hand in one swift motion, raises it effortlessly with one arm, and slams it straight into the bartender's head. Still wearing a calm expression, she asks if that was the kind of hole in the head he had been talking about. Another man standing nearby suddenly raises his hand, intending to slap her while hurling insults. Before he can land the hit, Daisy strikes first, delivering a sharp slap across his face. She casually stretches her shoulders as if warming up, then asks in a calm voice, "Who's next?" Instantly, everyone in the room loses the nerve to make another move. One of the men hesitantly asks who she really is. Daisy points toward the portrait hanging nearby and replies that she is the person in it. Their expressions immediately turn to confusion. Daisy explains that she once worked herself to death trying to save the world. Now that the world has finally been saved, she cannot tolerate scum like them running around unchecked. On top of that, there is something she absolutely must find within the next 3 years. To accomplish that goal, she first has to stay alive and healthy. She continues by saying that if they keep extorting protection money and forcing merchants into a corner, fewer quality ingredients will make it to the market, and whatever remains will lose its freshness. If she ends up eating food made from spoiled ingredients, she could get sick or, if she's especially unlucky, even die. So, in simple terms, if they continue collecting protection money, she dies. After saying that, she asks once again who wants to be first. One of the frightened men blurts out that if she kills them, she will become an enemy of the buried rat and will never make it out alive. Daisy frowns in confusion, saying she has never even heard of the buried rat before, then asks what exactly it is. The man explains that the buried rat is an information guild that expanded rapidly after the Magic War. It secretly operates throughout all 13 nations that once belonged to the former Magic Alliance, including the Penrota Empire. According to him, they are a ruthless organization willing to use any means necessary to obtain information or complete missions. They are also so secretive that even the identity of their guild master remains completely unknown. Daisy finds it hard to believe that such an organization would bother associating with rough thugs like them. However, the man insists that their union is under the buried rat's protection. He even pulls out a guild coin as proof and warns her that she is making a serious mistake. Just then, Daisy's partner walks up from behind, takes the coin from the man's hand, and says that it seems they are telling the truth. He explains that information guilds survive on trust and money, so even if this place looks insignificant, a branch is still a branch and should not be interfered with so carelessly. Daisy calmly replies that hearing that actually makes the situation even better. A pawn belonging to a larger organization is far more valuable than an ordinary local thug. She suggests using these men to quietly take control of the village without attracting unnecessary attention or pursuit, while they can use the guild to gather the information she needs. Her partner still warns that the plan is risky because the men could secretly report everything to the guild. Daisy tells him not to worry about that. Instead, she asks what they should have these men do first. The terrified man can only stare at the two of them as they casually remark that he already knows what he is supposed to do now. Her partner casually answers, "Of course, Maid," before admitting that he never realized she could actually talk this much. Daisy calmly responds that she simply never had any reason to. As the two men salute them, Daisy announces that, to celebrate the formation of their new merchant coalition, it is time to carry out their very first official mission. Her partner asks if she is talking about the item she mentioned earlier, and Daisy confirms that she means the Eye of Dianket. He repeats the name in surprise. It is the legendary relic of the great healer, said to possess the power to bring the dead back to life. Daisy explains that rumors place the relic somewhere within Midwintery and asks whether he knows anything about its whereabouts. He shakes his head and says that he does not. However, given the current situation, the timing is rather interesting because only a few days ago, the master was asking about that exact same relic. Daisy is caught off guard and wonders why Lu would have any interest in the Eye of Dianket. The assassin explains that they discovered a midwintery travel guide inside Lu's bedroom. A bookmark had been left precisely on the page describing the Eye of Dianket. If that is the case, then there is only one reasonable conclusion. The reason someone as obviously wealthy as Lu would deliberately take a job as both a cook and a gardener at the Weatherwoods estate is that there may be information related to the Eye of Dianket hidden somewhere there. At that moment, Lu suddenly calls out, "Miss Daisy, if you're going to stare at a man's face for that long, you should at least leave a review." Holding up a book in his hand, he casually adds that he has already planted the seeds. Daisy notices the title on the cover and immediately thinks that the Mystery Treasure Edition could contain clues leading to the Eye of Dianket. Just then, the head maid asks Lou whether he did something to upset Miss Daisy. Lou casually replies that perhaps his only offense is being too handsome. The head maid then turns to Daisy and says she understands the temptation to keep staring at Mr. Lou's face, but asks if Daisy has already finished cleaning the entrance, washing the laundry, checking the pantry, sweeping the hallways, wiping the windows, and replacing the light bulbs. The head maid orders Daisy to stop wasting time and return to her duties, warning that if she keeps slacking off, she will not be getting any food for the rest of the day. Hearing that, Daisy immediately thinks to herself that, just as she suspected, the head maid is the coldest-hearted woman in all of Midwintery. A little later, Lou asks Daisy whether she has finally come up with a name for the flower. Confused, Daisy asks why she would ever need to give a flower a name. Lou then asks if she even knows what type of seeds she planted in the first place. Daisy casually replies that it makes no difference. Lou tells her that if she keeps treating it like that, the flower will wither away before it even has the chance to sprout because plants grow best when they are cared for. That is why she should give it a proper name. He then casually remarks that if she is not interested enough to find out who he truly is, then she does not need to force herself. Later that day, while sitting alone in her room trying to think of a suitable name for the flower, Daisy suddenly decides that dealing with those troublesome people should come first before worrying about flowers. Only moments earlier, 2 assassins had broken into her room and announced that from now on she would be taking orders from them. Daisy's response is immediate. She slams both assassins into the ground without giving them a chance to react. She cannot believe that the buried rats have sent assassins after her yet again, and this time they even dispatched 2 of them. Once she has completely defeated them, Daisy grabs the unconscious men and throws both of them straight out of the window. She then figures she might as well dump them next door so the guy living there can put them to work as free labor. At that exact moment, the head maid steps outside while calmly smoking a cigarette and asks what all the commotion is about and who those men are. Daisy casually answers that they are spies. The head maid then asks whether Daisy managed to deal with both of them entirely on her own before wondering if she actually killed them. Daisy does not answer, and somehow her silence makes the entire situation even more unsettling. At the same time, Daisy realizes that the head maid did not show even the slightest bit of surprise despite witnessing assassins suddenly appear out of nowhere. She cannot help but think that anyone capable of becoming the head maid of the Weatherwoods estate must possess nerves of absolute steel. After putting out her cigarette, the head maid tells Daisy to come with her for a moment. Daisy instantly panics, convinced that she is finally about to be dismissed after only just getting used to life as a maid. Instead, the head maid calmly explains that Miss Daisy has come to mean a great deal to her because she is the very first maid who has managed to survive for more than a single week at the Weatherwoods estate. As both a gesture of gratitude and a way of asking for Daisy's continued service, the head maid asks whether she would like the opportunity to meet the master himself. She also makes it clear that the decision is entirely Daisy's. The instant Daisy hears that she has the chance to meet Viscount Weatherwood, she is completely stunned. If she forms a close connection with the Weatherwoods family and is officially appointed as one of their lifelong maids, then she would have permanent employment. And permanent employment means she would not be fired even if she happened to beat up a few spies. Unable to contain her excitement, Daisy grabs the head maid's hands and eagerly declares that she is absolutely going to meet him. The head maid immediately corrects her, reminding Daisy that she should answer in a more respectful manner instead. Realizing her mistake, Daisy quickly changes her response and says that she will absolutely meet him. The head maid lets out a sigh and gently explains that the proper way to say it is that she would be honored to meet him. The head maid tells Daisy that she should simply say that she will meet him. However, before she is allowed to enter, there is one condition she must accept. She has to swear an oath that she will never reveal anything concerning the master. The head maid explains that she will personally place the magical vow upon Daisy and asks if she is willing to accept it. Daisy is caught off guard, realizing that the head maid is capable of using magic as well. The ritual soon begins. The head maid asks Daisy Fager whether she swears never to expose any of the Weatherwoods family's secrets. Without hesitation, Daisy replies that she agrees. After hearing her answer, the head maid quietly remarks that this is not the first vow Daisy has ever taken, is it? She goes on to explain that a vow is never carved onto the body but instead becomes etched into the soul. Even if someone's physical body changes, the vow remains forever. It can never truly disappear, lingering like a lifelong scar that can never be erased. The head maid says she will not question Daisy any further because, even if she wanted to answer, she most likely would not be capable of doing so anyway. With that, she tells Daisy to come inside. As they move farther into the room, the head maid instructs Daisy to step closer and show proper respect because standing before her is Baron Grey Weatherwood. Holding the flower pot in her hands, Daisy stares silently at the object before her. She reflects that throughout her life she has encountered every kind of person imaginable. A battlefield brings together countless destinies that often cross paths only once. Even so, this is the very first time she has ever found herself meeting an egg. The head maid explains that this egg was personally entrusted to them by the master 4 years earlier. Because of that, it is recognized as the legitimate heir who inherited both the title and the wealth of the Roosevelt family that Lady Annette, the Baroness, left behind. However, Count Rosewell is still alive and in good health. Due to the conditions of the prenuptial agreement, every bit of that fortune remains locked away. Hearing this, Daisy begins wondering whether that inheritance is the true reason the assassins have been attacking. To an outsider, the estate looks completely bankrupt. And if Count Rosewell is somehow connected to all of this, then he is a seasoned veteran who once fought shoulder to shoulder with a sword saint. Even if his daughter has already passed away, there is no way a man like that would simply stand by while assassins targeted the family inheritance. Unable to hold back her curiosity any longer, Daisy awkwardly asks whether the master is actually inside the egg. The head maid replies that he probably is. She explains that whenever someone touches the egg, they can feel a heartbeat. Since the egg has continued to grow over the years, she believes the shell itself may simply be acting as a protective barrier. The first thing that comes to Daisy's mind is the possibility of a giant chicken hatching from it instead. The moment those thoughts become apparent, the head maid immediately shouts at Miss Daisy in complete frustration. Daisy then decides that, despite how unbelievable it sounds, the head maid's explanation is probably the most reasonable one. The Baron must genuinely be protected inside the shell. She begins wondering how much longer it will take before he finally wakes up because, the moment he does, she fully intends to ask him to employ her as a maid for life. Just then, her attention shifts to the flower pot she is carrying. The tiny sprout has already started growing. Even so, she still has not managed to decide on a name for it. Daisy quietly questions whether someone like her, who might not even survive the next 3 years, has any right to give the little plant a name. Just then, Lou calls out to her, telling Daisy to come and eat lunch before they finish all the food without her. Daisy brings the flower pot into the kitchen and announces that she has finally decided on a name. Rue. Lou immediately raises an eyebrow, saying the name sounds strangely familiar, before joking that she must finally be admitting she's one of his fans. Daisy instantly denies it. She explains that she only chose his name because she figured that if the plant carried his name, he would probably look after it even after she was gone. She then turns toward the flower pot and softly asks Rue what he thinks of his new name and whether he likes it. She begins to say that the master will definitely take good care of him, but if he ever gets thirsty over there before she can finish, Lou cuts her off with a grin, teasingly asking if she really loves the plant that much. Is she planning to hug it and even kiss it too? Embarrassed and irritated, Daisy immediately snaps back, calling him a crazy cook. Seeing the two about to argue again, the head maid quickly steps in, telling them both to settle down and eat their lunch. She then turns to Mr. Lou and reminds him to stop picking on Miss Daisy. A moment later, the head maid remembers something and asks Daisy if she could stop by the sewing room after she finishes eating. Daisy politely agrees. Lou then tells Daisy that while she is out, she should buy something besides potatoes for once. If she expects Rue to grow up healthy, then Miss Daisy needs to eat properly and take care of herself as well. Daisy quietly admits that he has a point. Later, as she walks through the marketplace, Daisy notices 2 children happily playing together. One proudly proclaims that he is Supreme Commander Raffaello, while the other excitedly responds that if that's the case, then she will be Lady Natasha. Listening to them, Daisy notices that the streets seem far livelier than usual and wonders whether some kind of festival is taking place. A moment later, her eyes fall upon a newspaper. The headline reads, 4th Anniversary Peace Festival Celebration, while another article beneath it mentions that Grand Duke Raffaello will not be attending this year's event. The instant Daisy sees the name Raffaello, she comes to an abrupt halt. Grand Duke Raffaello delivers a congratulatory speech celebrating the 4th anniversary of Peace Day. As Daisy reads the article in the newspaper, she quietly reflects that he has not changed at all since 4 years ago. She wonders whether he has been doing well. After her death, How did the world eventually reach its end, and does he still resent her for disobeying orders and leaving him behind? If those feelings truly remain, would he ever be able to forgive her? Even though Daisy longs to know the answers, Raffaello's words from the past suddenly come back to her. He had once told Anders that if there had been a brother he had lost, it might have been him. Thinking of that, Daisy quietly admits to herself that if Raffaello were ever to discover her true identity, she fears he would reject every precious moment they had once shared. Because of that fear, she deliberately chose to keep her distance from him. Just then, a woman approaches and asks whether Daisy has already finished running all of her errands. Daisy answers that she has. The woman then suggests that, if she has some spare time, she should also stop by the other shops. Daisy asks whether it is because of the festival, and the woman happily replies that today is Peace Day, the celebration marking their victory in the magic war. However, she explains that the special sales are not really because of the festival. The real reason is that a group of scoundrels who had been harassing the local merchants for years suddenly returned every bit of the stall fees they had stolen over the past 4 years. One of the merchants laughs with delight as the woman leans in and quietly whispers that she heard some righteous individual gave those pub thugs the beating they deserved. Around here, that person is considered the true hero. She goes on to say that, whoever that mysterious person may be, she would love to see their face just once because everyone would gladly line up to treat them to a meal. She even mentions that the photographer's younger brother said he wanted to take a magnificent portrait of the hero and feature it in a newspaper advertisement. Feeling slightly embarrassed, Daisy says that she should be on her way since she still has other matters to attend to. The woman warmly tells her to visit their shop again sometime. As Daisy walks off, she quietly wonders whether all of this was really the work of that butler. Then again, she realizes that allowing the shops to remain open during the day would naturally make it much easier to gather information. Before long, 2 men approach her and greet her by calling her Captain Maid. Daisy looks puzzled by the unexpected title. The men ask her to have a seat at the bar first, explaining that Butler Captain had informed them she would be arriving today, so they had already prepared everything in advance. Daisy asks what all of this is supposed to mean, and the men explain that a message had been left for her the previous night, instructing her to come to this place. As the bartender hands over a sealed letter, he mentions that he was specifically told to place it directly into her hands. Daisy unfolds the letter and reads its contents. Target confirmed. Eliminate every servant within the Weatherwoods estate. Recover all documents, materials, and items connected to Dien Ket from inside the estate. Remain cautious of the assassin who will arrive later. The moment she finishes reading, Daisy immediately understands what it means. This confirms that Dien Ket's relic is hidden somewhere inside the Weatherwoods estate. She asks the men if they managed to uncover anything else. They explain that, exactly as Butler Captain instructed, they operated quietly from the shadows and gathered every piece of information they could. As Daisy listens, she thinks that although the intelligence they collected is certainly valuable, something has undeniably become rather strange about these people. Even so, she praises them for their efforts before firmly telling them never to call her captain again. Without hesitation, the men respond, "As you command." Later, after returning to the Weatherwoods estate, Daisy informs the head maid that she has finished all of the shopping. The head maid thanks her for her hard work. Daisy says she will go and organize everything she bought, but before she can leave, the head maid stops her. She apologizes for suddenly bringing up such an unusual request before carefully asking whether Daisy would be willing to disguise herself as a man. The question leaves Daisy completely stunned. Her first thought is that they may have somehow uncovered her past, but she immediately dismisses the idea, convincing herself that there is no possible way they could know. Noticing Daisy's startled expression, the head maid quickly apologizes for surprising her and says that if she dislikes the suggestion, she can simply ignore it. Hearing that, Daisy quietly realizes with relief that her true identity has not actually been exposed after all. She then asks why she would need to dress as a man in the first place. The head maid explains that she was hoping Daisy could attend the noble council in the Viscount's stead. Now even more bewildered, Daisy asks why she would ever be expected to participate in such a meeting. The head maid explains that the reason is their master himself. Their Viscount is currently nothing more than a smooth little egg, making it impossible for him to attend the council in person. At that exact moment, Lou suddenly appears from behind them and remarks that he believes he has just overheard something incredibly interesting. Both Daisy and the head maid are completely startled by his unexpected arrival. Lou then says that, if he heard correctly, the mysterious, faceless master of Weatherwood is actually an egg, and politely asks them to explain the situation in much greater detail. The head maid tells Lu that she is not quite sure what he means by that. It appears that he has simply misheard the master's request to eat a smooth egg dish. Lu remarks that the dish must be incredibly secretive if they have been whispering about it behind the chef's back. He wonders just how extraordinary the recipe must be if it requires an oath to protect it. In his mind, it must be a secret recipe that has been passed down through generations. Daisy silently realizes that he is surprisingly perceptive. Lu continues by saying that, of course, if they truly wish to keep it a secret from him, there is nothing he can do about it. However, he admits that telling only Daisy simply because she arrived a few days earlier than he did is rather disappointing, especially when there are only 3 employees in total. If they genuinely cannot trust him, then he has a proposal. He declares that he is willing to make an oath as well, and in addition, he will also help with Daisy's noble debutante training. The headmaid's eyes widen as she stares at the oath cards. Lu casually tells her not to be so shocked, explaining that the only thing it proves is that he is exceptionally good at keeping secrets. Daisy immediately asks him exactly how many oaths he has made. Lu pauses to think for a moment before replying that he actually stopped counting after 70. Both Daisy and the headmaid are left utterly bewildered, wondering what kind of person he truly is. Even Daisy, who has endured countless hardships throughout her life, has never encountered anyone who has made such an unbelievable number of oaths. Lu then asks whether they have changed their minds or whether he is going to end up crying again. The scene then shifts to the 3 of them gathered together. Lu proceeds with the technique, referring to it as the heart's outer shell, an elegant curse. With a smile on his face, he carefully cracks the egg. The headmaid immediately begins spiraling in disbelief, unable to comprehend what he has just done. However, the damage is instantly detected, and the outer shell continues restoring itself as the process proceeds. Lu remarks that the extremely pervasive aesthetic extends even to the eye-shaped mark that appears whenever the magic is activated. He explains that it seems the eye itself was created by Tien. Daisy's eyes immediately widen at the mention of that name. The headmaid expresses her disbelief, insisting that it cannot be true. She explains that she had always assumed the egg was a magical tool created to protect the Viscount. Furthermore, whenever someone presses an ear against it, a pulse can clearly be felt, making it seem certain that the Viscount is inside. Lu replies that, in that case, they should find out the truth for themselves. With that, he begins performing an advanced magic analysis. The headmaid watches in astonishment, admitting that she has never witnessed such an incredibly detailed magical analysis before. Lu casually responds that the reason is simple: it was created by an unparalleled genius himself. He then resumes his explanation, stating that the magical tool is designed to symbolize its function of protecting the Weatherwoods family. In the event of an emergency, it is programmed to activate a wide-area attack spell. The pulse they have been feeling is merely a series of waves periodically emitted by the danger detection sensor engraved within the egg. In other words, the unfortunate truth is that the Viscount is not actually inside it. Daisy thinks that even the coldest woman of midwinter would surely be shocked by such a revelation. After all, the headmaid has spent years believing that she was protecting the Viscount, so discovering that those years may have been built upon a misunderstanding should make everything feel meaningless. To Daisy's surprise, however, she instead feels relieved. Her thoughts quickly shift to Lu himself. She cannot help wondering where exactly he came from and under whom he learned magic at such a young age. Reaching this level of mastery should be completely impossible. Whenever Daisy herself performs analysis magic, her vision turns completely white and she loses consciousness. She wonders whether the difference is simply because she lacks a protective sword. In the end, she concludes that she had worried for nothing and once again realizes that magicians truly are extraordinary. More importantly, however, something has been bothering her for quite some time. She asks Lu whether he was acquainted with Tien, since he casually referred to him earlier as that guy. Lu asks whether she is curious about it. From his reaction alone, Daisy becomes convinced that he really does know Tien. Since Tien died before she was even born, anyone who could have personally known him would have to be someone capable of using even the forbidden magic that extends one's lifespan. Lu then remarks that the identity of his rather interesting employer has finally been revealed. Since he also heard earlier that Daisy is preparing for her noble debut, he comments that it sounds like something he can assist with quite easily. The headmaid agrees, acknowledging that with Lu's level of magical ability, deceiving others would hardly be difficult. Instead, She believes that the real concern is Daisy herself. She admits that she cannot feel at ease sending Miss Daisy out on her own. Lou proposes a solution, suggesting that they simply have Daisy get married. If a wife remains by her side, then she can be properly supervised. The head maid considers the idea a good one but points out a problem. If Daisy were to become married, she would have to leave the mansion, and she still has the responsibility of protecting the Viscount. Lou tells her not to worry because he cannot possibly impose such a burden upon the head maid. His next declaration leaves Daisy slightly bewildered. He confidently announces that he will take on that role himself and declares that he will become the Viscountess Weatherwoods. The Grand Duke's assistant stands by the window, gazing outside before turning toward the Grand Duke. He remarks that it appears they are in for yet another long night. The scene then shifts to the past, where someone quietly states that, with the Commander-in-Chief severely injured and the supply station on the verge of collapse, they cannot hold out much longer. They reflect that, as expected, the plan to assassinate Mephisto has been proposed, but they cannot help wondering whether such a mission is even possible. They question who would willingly volunteer for a role that is almost certain to end in death. Even so, they reason that if someone could keep Mephisto's attention occupied, it would create enough time for the others to transport supplies and provide medical treatment to the wounded. At that moment, the Grand Duke arrives and immediately dismisses the idea of an assassination attempt as utter nonsense. He firmly declares that he has no intention of sending any of his subordinates alone into what is clearly a death trap. Furthermore, he points out that the chances of success are far too low, and he refuses to gamble on a losing hand. One of the commanders approaches him and remarks in disbelief that the Grand Duke is actually alive, joking that he had thought a corpse was crawling toward them. He comments that the effects of the purple love herb appeared to have worked exactly as expected. However, he then quietly whispers to the Grand Duke that there is a chance of victory if Ender is the one who carries out the mission. The Grand Duke immediately grabs Ender and refuses the suggestion without hesitation. He firmly declares that he will never allow such a thing and makes it clear that this is a direct order. He insists that Ender must remain by his side until the war has finally come to an end. However, in the next instant, Ender suddenly begins to fade away before his eyes, leaving the Grand Duke completely bewildered and confused. The scene returns to the present, where the assistant calls out to the Grand Duke and asks whether he is feeling all right. The Grand Duke regains his composure and asks what has brought his assistant to him at such a late hour. The assistant carefully asks whether he has once again been troubled by that same recurring dream. Observing that his complexion appears unusually pale and frightened, the Grand Duke dismisses his concerns, insisting that he is perfectly fine before asking what urgent matter has arisen. The assistant explains that important news has just arrived from the imperial capital. According to the report, His Majesty the Emperor has privately discussed plans for the conquest of the North with 5 influential nobles. The Grand Duke immediately wonders whether the discussion concerns the valuable mines located within the North Dews Mountains. The assistant confirms that this is indeed the case. He further explains that the Emperor intends to appoint the Grand Duke as the leader of the vanguard for the campaign. Hearing this, the Grand Duke reflects that His Majesty seems particularly eager to drive him away from the front lines. He then asks whether there are any additional reports that require his attention. The assistant continues by reporting that a survivor was discovered on Queen Island approximately 1 month earlier. The survivor's name is Lucian. According to the report, she stands at roughly 170 centimeters in height and possesses a slender build. However, the assistant also explains that the letter containing this information was intercepted twice before finally reaching them on its 3rd attempt. The Grand Duke questions whether there is anything particularly unusual about the report that would justify repeated interception. The assistant replies that Lucian is currently living in Midwinter, where she has taken employment as a maid. He then adds that her physical appearance reportedly bears a striking resemblance to Sir Ender. The revelation causes the Grand Duke's eyes to widen, and his hand instinctively twitches. Even so, he immediately convinces himself that she must simply be someone who resembles Ender. He reminds himself that his only blood relative, his elder sister, was officially declared dead during the Queen Island incident. Refusing to entertain any false hope, he orders his assistant to discard any future reports that lack sufficient credibility before they are ever brought to his attention. The scene then shifts back to Daisy, who silently reflects upon the shocking truth she has just uncovered. She realizes that the object before her is truly Diane's eyeball. She wishes with all her heart that it were merely an ordinary egg. She even wishes that it had simply been the Viscount himself sealed inside. However, reality proves far more disturbing than either possibility. She concludes that, If she intends to make use of it, she will have no choice but to steal it in secret. Even so, she cannot deny her sense of relief, knowing that the relic is now resting right beneath her nose, within her reach. As another thought crosses her mind, she begins to wonder whether all of Diane's other relics or weapons as well. Area of effect attack magic and healing magic exist as complete opposites of one another. The dream of extending a person's lifespan is an incredibly long and arduous pursuit. At that moment, Lou arrives and asks Daisy what on earth she is thinking about. He tells her to come outside because they need to go somewhere. Daisy wonders whether he is simply sending her on another errand, but she quietly follows him. After some time, they arrive at a clothing shop. Lou tells Daisy to head inside first. The shopkeeper warmly welcomes them, while Daisy looks around in confusion and wonders what the purpose of their visit is. Lou explains that everything is for a successful debut. Daisy immediately tells him that she does not have any money to pay for any of it. However, Lou casually reassures her that it is not a problem because he is rich. He further explains that the head maid readily agreed to the idea after hearing that he would personally be covering all the expenses. Lou then turns to the dressmaker and begins placing an enormous order. He requests formal dresses and attire suitable for balls and banquets, 2 sets of everyday clothing, a spring coat, 2 sets each of hats and gloves, 2 sets of pajamas, 4 sets each of socks and underwear, and several outfits appropriate for tea parties as well. He then asks whether everything can be completed within 15 days. The dressmaker apologetically explains that, considering the unusually large quantity of the order, completing everything within 15 days would be rather difficult. Lou immediately questions whether that is still the case even after learning that the clothing is intended for Viscount and Viscountess Weatherwood. The moment those names are mentioned, the dressmaker excitedly calls for the shop's owner. The owner quickly appears and is astonished to hear that the Viscount and Viscountess Weatherwood, who have been living in seclusion, will be wearing garments made by their shop. She enthusiastically declares that they can leave everything to her. Calling it a golden opportunity, she quickly corrects herself and politely asks whether it would be acceptable for her to visit the Weatherwood mansion personally to take the couple's measurements. Lou declines the suggestion, explaining that such a visit will not be necessary. He says that the Viscountess is extremely busy, so she has asked him to use his companion as a model instead since Daisy has a similar height and skin tone. Hearing this, Daisy immediately pulls Lou aside and quietly whispers to him. She reminds him that he had previously said he would be disguising himself as the Viscountess, so she cannot understand why the dresses are being tailored to fit her measurements instead. Lou calmly explains that transformation magic is much easier to use when there is an actual model to serve as a physical standard. He adds that he had also intended to use transformation magic to alter Daisy's appearance so that it would match his own physique. He then asks whether she does not want that. Daisy silently reflects that, if that is the case, Ender's physique would definitely be much more comfortable. She honestly admits that she does not want to resemble Lou because he is simply far too big in many different ways. Lou quietly leans closer and teasingly asks exactly where and in what ways she thinks he is so big. His question immediately causes Daisy to turn pale with embarrassment. Choosing to ignore the teasing, Daisy explains that her ideal body would be around 180 centimeters tall, with well-developed arm muscles and a slim waist. Lou responds with disbelief, remarking that he cannot understand how such a short and stubby physique could possibly be her preferred type. He admits that he genuinely cannot comprehend Daisy's sense of aesthetics. With their brief conversation finished, the two of them return to the others. The owner asks whether they are finally ready to proceed. She then asks whether the Viscount's outfit should also be tailored to match his physique in the same manner as the Viscountess's clothing. Meanwhile, the dressmaker quietly watches the pair and cannot shake the feeling that something about them has subtly changed. Though she wonders whether it is merely her imagination, she politely asks them to step forward so that she can begin taking their measurements. As she measures Daisy, the owner enthusiastically recommends a soft skirted dress that would beautifully accentuate the Viscountess's silhouette. She also suggests a fashionable ball gown with an off-the-shoulder design, explaining that such styles are extremely popular these days. Meanwhile, as Lou tries on various garments intended for the Viscount, everyone present cannot help but admire the sight before them. They silently think that the two of them truly look like the perfect couple. Daisy thinks that she would much rather be cleaning, wondering whether getting dressed up has always been this exhausting. Just then, she notices an ice cream shop nearby. Lou offers to buy her some ice cream, leaving Daisy wondering what exactly he is trying to make her do this time. He promptly explains that the carrot and the stick always go hand in hand, asking why anyone would give a dog a treat while training it otherwise. His remark immediately causes Daisy to wonder whether he is comparing her to a dog. Lu then tells her to wait patiently in the shade while he goes to buy the ice cream. Daisy walks over to the shaded area, thinking that, now that she considers it, she does not believe she has ever visited this part of the city before. She notices a sign identifying the place as Midwintery National Peace Park. She begins to wonder whether it is a cemetery built to honor the Allied forces. However, remembering Lu's instruction, she decides to wait patiently. At that moment, she suddenly feels as though someone is calling out to her, asking why she is simply standing there looking around. Almost unconsciously, Daisy begins walking toward the graves, and the scenery before her abruptly transforms into the image of a battlefield. Someone frantically calls out to Andert, urging him to snap out of it. He turns toward one of the soldiers, who tells him that there are far too many members of the Mephisto Legion and insists that they should give up on the soldiers who cannot be saved and focus on evacuating the civilians instead. However, Andert refuses to accept those words. He demands to know what the soldier is talking about and reaches out, urging him to hold on. The wounded guard breaks into tears, saying that he will not survive and pleading with Andert to deliver his final farewell to his mother. Even so, Andert angrily rejects those words, telling the guard to stop talking nonsense because he can tell his mother himself once the war is finally over. Just then, Lu appears before Daisy and gently tells her that the war has already ended. However, Andert continues shouting desperately, asking whether no one can see the demons gathered on the ridge and demanding that they stop standing around and help him carry the wounded instead. Lu calmly tells Daisy that there are no wounded soldiers anymore and no demons left to fight. He gently assures her that it is finally time for her to come back. Daisy hesitantly wonders whether it is truly over. Lu reassures her that it is indeed over and promises that no one else is going to die. He adds that the only thing dying at that moment is the ice cream he is holding for her. He gently pats her and tells her that it is time for them to go home. With those comforting words, Daisy slowly falls asleep against his shoulder. Back in the present, Daisy opens her eyes and quietly thinks about that place. When Lu tells her that the water is right beside her, Daisy realizes that hearing his voice was not part of a dream after all. She wonders whether her senses have become so dull that she can no longer distinguish reality from a hallucination. She thanks him for helping her, acknowledging that he saved her. Lu remarks that he is sure the melted ice cream would have appreciated hearing those words. Daisy asks whether he threw the ice cream away, commenting that he should have simply eaten it instead. Lu replies that he would have loved to do that, but he had to carry someone all the way back instead. Daisy thinks that he is exaggerating, although she cannot deny that he is not entirely wrong. She then asks whether he has been taking care of her the entire time. Lu confirms that he has, along with the servants. Daisy asks whether, by servant, he means the butler assassin. Lu replies that he means him as well as all the other burdens that Daisy dumped onto him. He explains that he has already informed the head maid that Daisy will be late today, telling her that Daisy had buried another person and therefore needed some special training. Daisy then asks Lu whether he came to the Weatherwoods estate because of Dian and whether he is planning to steal it. Lu reminds her that he already told her he would only reveal the truth once the flower had bloomed. Daisy says that she is merely curious, adding that he is certainly a unique individual. Lu leans closer and tells her that, since she is so curious, he will reveal one thing to her. He warns that if she does not fall for him, she will only end up getting hurt. His words leave Daisy silent for a moment before she immediately asks when he is going to stop talking like a crazy person. Lu wonders whether that will happen when she finally gives up on him. He then asks whether experiences like what happened to her occur often. Daisy replies that the hallucinations are a first, although she has been suffering from nightmares over the past few days. Lu asks whether something painful has happened recently that might have triggered those hallucinations or nightmares. Daisy responds by asking the opposite question, wondering whether anything joyful has happened that is enough to make her forget those painful memories, even if only for a moment. Lu remarks that poor Daisy does not know how to answer a single question. Daisy insists that it is not as though anything particularly special has happened. Lu disagrees, saying that she simply has not realized it yet, and suggests that they try a bit of introspection instead. He asks her to close her eyes and think deeply about who she truly is. As Daisy does so, she thinks of herself as Daisy, the man once known as Andert, and, even further back than that, the woman once called Phaedra. But Daisy wonders whether someone can truly be said to know her simply because they know her name. A name is usually given with affection, and affection creates a sense of responsibility toward the person who bears it. That is precisely why she chooses the name Daisy, a name so common that it can be found anywhere throughout the empire. She adopts it to conceal her true identity, to ensure that no trace of her real self remains on this land. Even if she lives here for only 3 years, she grows to enjoy the maid's work that comes with this half-hearted name. She spends her days dusting furniture and polishing windows until they gleam. She finds comfort in becoming an ordinary member of society, living peacefully as Daisy instead of Andert, without having to slay demons or fight endless battles. Even so, nightmares and hallucinations continue to haunt her from time to time. She relives the overwhelming sense of loss and helplessness she experiences when she loses her comrades. At the same time, she cannot forget the exhilaration of crushing evil, nor the intoxicating sense of liberation that makes her head burn with excitement. At the very least, she refuses to deny the 14 years she lives as Andert. Although she resolves to live as Daisy, she realizes that she is truly a duplicitous and flawed maid. That realization leads her to wonder whether she truly has no affection for the identity of Daisy. She remembers a day when someone asks whether she truly chooses that particular flower. The person remarks that it suits her perfectly, that it is a beautiful flower of spring. Daisy explains that she chooses it simply because she finds the name beautiful. In truth, she is the one who plants the daisies herself. It is never because she lacks affection for the name. The person who chooses to live as Andert and the person who chooses to live as Daisy are both parts of her. Every experience she accumulates, every passing moment, becomes a part of who she is. Tomorrow's self will always be more complete than today's. She finally understands her own identity. She knows exactly who she is, and her once fragile soul, which always seems as though it might shatter, becomes stronger and more resolute than ever before. Immediately afterward, Daisy becomes curious about the strange change within herself and questions Lu about it. Lu explains that she is experiencing the state known as the unity of mind and body for the very first time. Daisy has never heard of such a concept and wonders what it actually means. Lu simply explains that it is the first step toward ascending into a half-god, although Daisy has only just begun walking that path. Unable to understand why it is happening to her, Daisy questions the reason. Lu observes that she appears to be an exceptionally skilled swordswoman and wonders whether the person who teaches her the sword never explains the concept of unity of mind and body. Daisy reflects on the countless battlefields she has crossed and realizes that, if she has to name a master, then everyone she meets during the war could be considered one. However, another question troubles her even more. She cannot understand how Lu manages to recognize that she is a swordswoman despite her careful disguise. Lu merely claims that it is a secret. Watching the confused expression spread across Daisy's face amuses him greatly. He enjoys seeing her react that way and feels tempted to tease her even further. However, he notices that the sun has already risen, leaving no more time for playful conversation. That very moment, the head maid scolds Daisy for arriving late once again. She sternly warns that if Daisy is late even one more time, part of her wages will be deducted. She also announces that, beginning that very day, Daisy will attend proper etiquette lessons during every noon break. Daisy silently accepts the punishment, realizing that self-reflection is a luxury that ordinary workers simply cannot afford. A few days later, the head maid carefully examines Daisy's transformed appearance. Although transformation magic itself is not considered particularly advanced, she is deeply impressed by how flawless and beautiful this transformation appears. Daisy now possesses elegant blonde hair, brilliant blue eyes, and soft, delicate hands that clearly belong to someone who grows up in luxury without ever developing a single callus. Daisy quietly acknowledges that Lu perfectly recreates the appearance she requests. The head maid confidently remarks that Daisy now resembles a distinguished member of the Weatherwood family so convincingly that anyone would readily believe the disguise. Despite hearing such praise, Daisy reminds herself that no matter how perfectly she disguises herself as the former head's nephew, she remains nothing more than a maid who stands on the verge of having her wages reduced. Even so, the head maid observes that Daisy shows no signs of awkwardness while carrying herself in such an aristocratic appearance. In her eyes, Daisy is far from ordinary. Instead, she embodies boldness itself. The head maid acknowledges that being bold is certainly a good quality, but she emphasizes that Daisy must remain extremely cautious. She repeatedly reminds her to be very careful throughout the mission. Daisy confidently reassures the head maid that there is no longer any reason to worry. The die has already been cast, and if any problems arise, as always, Lu will handle them. Just then, Daisy notices someone wearing a summer hat. When she turns around, she is momentarily stunned by the sight of an extraordinarily beautiful person standing before her. It is none other than Lu. For the time being, Lu has completely transformed into the appearance of a woman. Lu reminds Daisy that, for the duration of their mission, she must remember that he is now a woman. He jokingly warns her not to go around charming every girl she encounters and tells her to conduct herself properly. Daisy instinctively begins to protest, thinking that Lu means he is actually a man rather than a woman. With an amused smile, Lu tells her to pay close attention and carefully consider how things feel. He points out that, at the moment, she is neither truly a woman nor a man. Because of the transformation magic, she no longer belongs entirely to either identity. That means she could just as easily attract both men and women, making it necessary for her to be twice as cautious during their mission. Daisy reflects upon the identity Lu has chosen for himself. The name Maureen Serene, which Lu personally steals in order to act as Viscount Weatherwood's wife, originally belongs to the third daughter of a count's family from the Northern Continental Allied Church. When Lu first proposes using this identity, even the head maid strongly opposes the idea, insisting that committing identity theft is unacceptable. However, Lu casually dismisses her concerns, confidently claiming that it will not become a problem. Although he is required to swear yet another magical oath promising not to cause any harm, Daisy cannot help but think that Lu has developed a habit of using magical oaths as convenient shortcuts whenever he is too lazy to deal with complicated situations personally. With every preparation finally complete, Daisy and Lu board the waiting carriage together. As they depart, the head maid sincerely expresses her hope that both of them will return safely without encountering any major incidents. She also entrusts them with the responsibility of looking after the Weatherwood family during their mission. While the carriage begins moving, Daisy teasingly reminds Lu that she clearly hears the head maid refer to him as the Viscount's wife. Lu calmly corrects her, explaining that from this point onward she should address him as Maureen rather than Lu, because the two of them are about to play the roles of the most passionately devoted newlyweds in the entire world. Daisy calls out to Lu while they are still inside the carriage, and the mere sound of his name immediately irritates him. Realizing her mistake, she quickly corrects herself and addresses him as Maureen instead before asking if she may ask him one final question. However, he flatly refuses, declaring that if she wishes to ask him anything, she must first lean forward and politely beg by calling him master. Without the slightest hesitation, Daisy immediately kneels before him and respectfully pleads for him to enlighten her. Satisfied, Lu finally grants her permission to speak. Daisy carefully asks whether it is true that when someone reaches the realm of a demigod, their body undergoes a complete transformation, causing every illness, injury, and scar to disappear. She then asks the question that truly concerns her, whether that miraculous change also applies to the soul itself. Her concern is not without reason. Daisy knows that a remaining lifespan has been reduced to only 3 years. While part of that is because her physical body once died, she believes the greater cause is the devastating Mephisto magic that was powerful enough to fracture her very soul. If becoming a demigod could heal even the soul, then she would no longer need to desperately search for Diane's relic to save herself. Lu listens before coldly remarking that she is dreaming far too big. He points out that simply because she accidentally achieved the unity of mind and body does not mean the remaining stages will be equally easy to attain. He sarcastically questions whether she truly believes she can become the world's luckiest maid and enjoy a full natural lifespan without putting in the necessary effort. His harsh words strike Daisy more deeply than she expects. Even she has to admit that his criticism is painfully accurate. Lu continues by telling her to stop clinging to meaningless hope and prepare herself because it is finally time to begin the task he has assigned. Soon afterward, the carriage comes to a stop, and the two step outside. Before moving on, Lu reminds Daisy once again that she must carry out the assignment he entrusted to her without making any mistakes. As Daisy follows behind him, her thoughts begin to drift elsewhere. She reflects that it has already been 9 years since that unforgettable day, the day Natasha, the Allied forces' greatest magician, was formally invested as the crown princess of the Penlota Empire. Because the war was still ongoing, the investiture ceremony had been held in a relatively modest manner despite its significance. She vividly remembers Natasha approaching Andert immediately after the ceremony. Since he had promised to grant her any gift to celebrate her becoming crown princess, provided it was not something impossible like plucking the stars from the sky, Natasha had wasted no time in making her request. Without a trace of hesitation, she had boldly asked him to marry her. That unforgettable moment had gone down in history as the day the crown princess openly and earnestly proposed to the commander in front of everyone present. Remembering it now, Daisy cannot help thinking that Natasha had always been an incredibly fascinating woman. She quietly wonders how her old friend is doing these days. Her train of thought is suddenly interrupted when Lou notices her absent-minded expression and questions what she has been thinking about so deeply. Daisy quickly claims that she was not thinking about anything in particular, but Lou immediately calls her bluff. He confidently states that she had been thinking about another woman and warns her to behave herself. If she dares to try anything suspicious, he jokingly threatens that he might cut off something she does not even possess. His ridiculous remark sends a chill through Daisy, leaving her silently wondering whether this is what married life is supposed to feel like. Before long, they arrive at the high-speed flying boat boarding area. A staff member respectfully greets them, recognizing them as Viscount Weatherwood and his wife. He informs them that he has been assigned to escort them personally and explains that their luggage will be delivered separately to their private cabin. He also mentions that a banquet is currently underway and politely asks whether they would like to head there immediately. Both of them agree, and the attendant leads the way. As soon as Viscount Weatherwood and his wife make their entrance into the banquet hall, their arrival is formally announced. The entire hall immediately fills with whispers as the gathered nobles turn their attention toward them. Many are astonished to finally see the mysterious Viscount Weatherwood, the noble who is rumored to never reveal his face in public. Their curiosity grows even stronger when they notice the breathtakingly beautiful woman standing beside him, leaving everyone wondering if she is truly his wife. Feeling the countless gazes directed at them, Daisy quietly complains that every pair of eyes in the room is fixed on them because of Lou. Instead of sympathizing with her, Lou casually remarks that she should stop complaining when she has been blessed with such a handsome husband. Without giving her any time to recover, he reminds her that this is the perfect opportunity to put the head maid's lessons into practice by walking around and striking up conversations with the other guests. Inside, however, Daisy is overwhelmed with panic. She silently apologizes to the head maid, realizing that she never even reviewed those lessons properly. Now, standing in the middle of a hall filled with influential nobles, she cannot remember a single thing she was taught. Just as Daisy is wondering how she is supposed to approach the other guests, someone suddenly calls out to her, asking whether she is truly the Viscount Weatherwood. The familiar voice immediately catches her attention, and she quickly recognizes the speaker as Count Rosebell. He is the father-in-law of the previous Viscount Weatherwood and one of the comrades who once fought alongside her on countless battlefields during the war. Time has left its mark on him, and he has clearly aged over the years, yet his sharp, unwavering eyes remain exactly as she remembers them. Standing beside her, Lou quietly whispers that she should greet him properly. Following his advice, Daisy respectfully approaches the Count and politely asks if he is indeed Count Rosebell. She explains that ever since she was a child, her aunts had often told her stories about his incredible feats and heroic accomplishments. Her words catch the Count completely off guard. A faint blush appears on his face as he asks, almost shyly, whether her aunts truly spoke about him. Daisy warmly replies that, to her, he has always been someone worthy of being called a hero. While maintaining her smile, Daisy cannot help thinking to herself that he treasures his daughter just as dearly now as he always did in the past. The Count then turns his attention toward the beautiful person standing beside Daisy and begins asking who this elegant companion might be. Before he can even finish his sentence, Lou smoothly steps forward and introduces himself as Morian. He politely expresses how honored he is to meet one of the Allied forces' legendary commanders. The Count returns the greeting before narrowing his eyes with curiosity, wondering whether Morian is a siren. Without showing the slightest hesitation, Lou calmly explains that he comes from the kingdom of Astrosa and is the son of Count Serene, a noble belonging to the Allied Church on the northern continent. The Count remarks that such a journey must have been incredibly long. Lou simply smiles and replies that he would gladly travel even farther for the sake of his beloved husband. The moment the word husband leaves Lou's lips, Count Rosebell's gaze immediately shifts toward Daisy, becoming noticeably sharper. That single look brings back countless memories for Daisy. She remembers all too well that Count Rosebell was the type of commander who never tolerated even the smallest mistake during training. His soldiers were expected to complete every exercise flawlessly. Even among his closest comrades, anyone who failed to salute properly or disobeyed an order would receive disciplinary punishment without exception. In truth, he had always been an exceptionally strict officer. Considering the circumstances, Daisy fully understands why he is upset. After all, she is merely the nephew of the man who married his beloved daughter, and on top of that, the marriage itself had never even been formally announced to him. They had not visited him, nor had they offered him the courtesy of a proper greeting. It is only natural that he would feel displeased. Realizing this, Daisy immediately bows her head and sincerely apologizes, explaining that there were unavoidable circumstances behind everything that had happened. She tells him that she completely understands his feelings. However, she quietly admits that she is not truly the real Viscount Weatherwood. After listening to her explanation, Count Rosebell calmly remarks that, regardless of everything else, he is relieved that the Weatherwood family line has not come to an end. Even so, he warns Daisy that not everyone will be as understanding of those circumstances as he is. He advises her to be extremely careful moving forward. With those final words, the Count takes his leave. Daisy respectfully thanks him for his valuable advice as she watches him walk away. Once he is gone, Daisy turns toward Lou and asks whether she should continue introducing herself to more guests. Lu immediately shakes his head. Instead, he tells her that they should simply return to their room because the guests will naturally come to seek them out on their own. His answer leaves Daisy utterly confused. She wonders how that could possibly happen. However, before she can question him any further, a noble couple approaches them with polite smiles, introducing themselves and expressing their pleasure at finally meeting Viscount Weatherwood. That is only the beginning. One guest after another continues approaching them, each eager to exchange greetings with the mysterious Viscount and his beautiful spouse. Before long, the line of visitors seems endless, forcing Daisy and Lou to repeatedly engage in polite conversations without even a moment to rest. By the time the seemingly endless introductions finally come to an end, both of them are completely exhausted. Daisy cannot help thinking that even the life of a maid seems to be nothing more than an endless chain of hardships. As soon as they return to their cabin, she tells Lou that she is going to take a short nap. She asks him to wake her before the evening banquet begins, intending to leave the remaining preparations entirely in his hands while she enjoys a few precious moments of rest. She quickly drifts off to sleep. Some time later, Daisy begins to regain consciousness. Still half asleep, she notices that one of her arms feels unusually heavy. Assuming that the banquet must already be over and that morning has arrived, she slowly opens her eyes. The very first thing she sees is Lou, peacefully asleep right beside her. The moment Daisy catches sight of Lou, she immediately leaps off the bed in alarm. Lou casually remarks that she should stop making such a fuss, pointing out that she is ruining his immersion in the role they are supposed to be playing. He teasingly warns that if she continues behaving like this, she might leave him with no choice but to throw her off the airship. Unwilling to let the matter go, Daisy insists that they should at least have separate beds. However, Lou questions why a newlywed couple would ever sleep apart. Daisy quickly reminds him that their marriage is nothing more than a cover for the mission. Lou cannot resist teasing her further, commenting that she is so flustered that she is stuttering like an idiot once again. Although he admits that seeing such an expression on a man's face is admittedly a little irritating, he declares that, for the time being, she is his beloved Viscount, so he will simply endure it. With that, he tells her to stop worrying about such things and instead get up to check the day's schedule. Daisy is surprised, wondering whether there is even such a thing as a daily schedule aboard the airship. Lou explains that the entire itinerary consists of little more than socializing, entertaining guests, and going on dates. According to him, that is simply the everyday routine of noble society, where people devote their time and effort to building and strengthening relationships with one another. Hearing that, Daisy realizes that she cannot afford to sit around doing nothing while everyone else is making connection. A short while later, Lou notices Daisy preparing to head out and questions whether she is leaving already. Daisy explains that there is something she needs to investigate. She suspects that the person who hired the assassin to target the Weatherwood family is likely a member of aristocratic society. Her reasoning is simple. Ever since their attendance at the gathering was publicly announced, the assassin has completely stopped pursuing them. To Daisy, that can only mean there is no longer any need to send an assassin when the mastermind can now meet them face to face at the event itself. Listening to her reasoning, Lou silently acknowledges that she is far more perceptive than most people give her credit for. Before she leaves, he suddenly steps closer and plants a kiss on her, wishing her a safe trip. He casually adds that he intends to stay behind and rest a little longer, but before he can even finish speaking, Daisy has already disappeared without looking back. As she walks away, Daisy cannot help thinking that Lou is truly an outrageous person. She cannot believe he had the audacity to press his lips against another woman under the excuse of acting, especially when such behavior has absolutely nothing to do with their mission. Her thoughts are interrupted when several young men approach her and politely call out to Viscount Witherwood. One of them introduces himself as a Jersey, explaining that his father owns and runs a newspaper company. Another introduces himself as Valkin and mentions that his father serves as the president of a bank. Rather than maintaining the usual formal distance expected between nobles and commoners, Daisy warmly suggests that they become friends so they can speak more comfortably with one another. Her unexpected friendliness catches them off guard, and they awkwardly explain that they are merely members of the upper class and not actual nobility. Daisy asks her new acquaintances whether something interesting is happening below, remarking that it has suddenly become incredibly noisy. They excitedly explain that the event everyone has been waiting for is finally about to begin and ask whether she would like to come and watch with them. Although Daisy feels they are being rather long-winded, she ultimately agrees to accompany them. The three of them make their way toward the gathering, where an enormous crowd has already assembled. As they look over the sea of spectators, they explain that this is the famous succession battle of the Buckley-Greeton family, an event far too significant for anyone to miss. Upon hearing the family name, Daisy immediately recalls the prestige surrounding the ducal house. The Buckley-Greeton family serves as the guardian of the empire, entrusted with protecting the imperial family itself. Throughout history, every successive head of the family has been recognized as the strongest individual in the entire empire. Unlike most noble houses, however, the position of successor is determined purely by ability. Bloodline, age, and even gender hold no importance. The only requirements are possessing overwhelming skill and earning the acknowledgement of both the previous family head and the emperor. As fate would have it, the current duke, the legendary sword St. Gehark Buckley-Greeton, is the man presiding over this generation's succession. As the duel begins, someone points out the contestants to Daisy. The young woman with the long silver hair is Jean, the second-ranked candidate in the line of succession, while her opponent is Oster, who currently stands fifth in the succession rankings. The moment the battle starts, the spectators are captivated by Jean's performance. Many remark that she is even more talented than they had expected, displaying sword chi of an astonishing level despite her young age. They describe her as a genius among geniuses. Yet what captures their attention even more is the expression in her eyes. Rather than simply being gifted, they believe she is something far more terrifying, a sword demon, someone utterly possessed by the blade, existing solely to live and die by the sword. Even though such individuals border on madness, everyone agrees that swordsmen like them are at least honorable warriors who never resort to underhanded tricks. Amidst the murmuring crowd, someone suddenly questions whether the young girl before them is truly the leader of the Assassin Guild. Another person confirms that she is. They explain that if Jean dies, the Assassin Guild she commands will inevitably collapse as well, causing the Reapers who currently target them to disappear. Of course, carrying out an assassination within aristocratic society would be extremely difficult, so the next best option would be to strip her of her succession rights instead. If Daisy succeeds in accomplishing that, she will be rewarded with a clue regarding the Diane artifact as well as valuable information about Lu. Hearing those words, Daisy is left deeply puzzled. She cannot understand why someone as young as Jean would feel the need to lead an assassin guild in the first place. Nor does she have the slightest idea how one could possibly revoke Jin's succession rights. Before she can think any further, a strange voice suddenly echoes through her mind, urging someone to come forward and fight. Daisy freezes, wondering what she has just heard. Moments later, the mysterious voice speaks again, declaring that it would be such a waste for the battle to end like this. Daisy immediately realizes that the voice is not coming from any person nearby. It is the sword itself. At that very moment, Oster launches another fierce attack against Jean. Without hesitation, Jean delivers a decisive counterstrike that overwhelms him completely, while the sword continues calling out to Oster, encouraging him to keep coming and continue the battle. Watching the scene unfold, Daisy is struck by a startling realization. She wonders whether Jean has already reached the legendary first stage where body and mind become one, allowing her to hear the very voice of the sword itself. As the duel concludes, Jean turns her gaze directly toward Daisy before politely apologizing for the disturbance caused during their first meeting. She then introduces herself as Jean and respectfully asks whether Daisy could spare a moment of her time. Jean remarks that now is not really a good time. At the very same moment, Daisy also thinks that the timing could not be worse. Realizing she needs to handle the situation carefully, she decides to borrow one of Lu's techniques and smoothly defuse the encounter. Offering a polite apology, she explains that she is already a married man before expressing her hope that Jean will find a far better match elsewhere. Her unexpected response leaves everyone present staring at her in complete shock, their eyes widening in disbelief. Later, as Daisy reflects on the incident, she feels that it had been a reasonably gentlemanly rejection. However, the man standing beside her completely disagrees, wondering how she can calmly continue drinking after dropping such an unbelievable bombshell. Daisy cannot help but wonder whether Jean had approached her because she had fallen for her appearance. That assumption is immediately dismissed. The others explain that there is absolutely no chance of that. While many young noble women may dream of marriage, Jean is nothing like them. She is famous for caring about nothing except her sword. Hearing that, Daisy realizes the description fits perfectly. Earlier, Jean had indeed worn the expression of someone looking for a fight rather than romance. Even so, that only deepens Daisy's suspicion. According to her butler, Jean is the master of an assassin organization. It is already strange enough that someone known as a sword demon also runs an assassin guild, but it makes even less sense that such a person would approach her intended target so openly in front of everyone. Daisy concludes that Jean must have another hidden objective. When the others notice that Daisy has fallen silent, they ask what she is thinking about. After carefully considering the situation, Daisy decides she has no other option. An interesting idea comes to her, and she resolves that she will become the bait herself. From that day onward, Daisy spends every afternoon socializing with the other guests while passing each night inside the cabin, where she and Lou play cards together. Although it appears as though she is simply enjoying herself, she is far from idle. Her quiet investigation steadily produces valuable results, and she manages to uncover 3 important pieces of information. The first discovery concerns Jean. Despite her incredible strength, she can never become the next duke because the family already possesses an overwhelming monster she has never defeated, a genius named Garush. The second piece of information revolves around Iggy. Daisy learns that Iggy once studied abroad in the Union of the Northern Holy States, where the Serene family resides. She begins to suspect that, through Iggy's connections, she may finally uncover why Lou deliberately chose to disguise himself under the identity of Morian. Finally, Daisy casually asks one of her acquaintances whether they have ever heard of the relic of Diane. The moment she sees their expressions, she immediately realizes they know something about it. To avoid arousing suspicion, she explains that her wife simply enjoys stories related to the relic. Rather than answering directly, one of them advises Gray that, if they were in his position, they would abandon the idea altogether. The others quickly agree, explaining that rumors claim several extremely high-ranking individuals have been searching for the relic of Diane for quite some time. Those words confirm Daisy's growing suspicion. She realizes that her instincts were correct all along. If influential figures are searching for the relic, then the mysterious client may actually be aboard this very airship. Having investigated this deeply, Daisy understands that it is only a matter of time before someone makes a move against her. Whether that person is Jean or the mysterious client, she is convinced that the confrontation she has been anticipating is finally about to begin. As those thoughts occupy her mind, Daisy calmly participates in a gambling game. Around the table, the spectators suddenly erupt into loud cheers and shouts of amazement as they congratulate the Viscount, unable to believe that she has managed to win with such an unlikely hand. The crowd immediately begins praising Daisy, marveling at her victory. Several people jokingly remark that there is no point in her remaining a man any longer and that she should simply go for it. Others enthusiastically place their bets on the Viscount to win the next round as well, convinced that her streak is far from over. Amid the growing excitement, one of Daisy's friends asks whether she is doing all right. Daisy admits that the entire day has been incredibly chaotic. Ever since that morning, everything has been happening one after another, and she genuinely cannot understand why everyone keeps surrounding her. After thinking it over, she jokingly concludes that perhaps her handsome face is simply too much of a problem. Her friend immediately dismisses the remark, pointing out that she truly has no talent for making jokes. Even so, they admit they had expected such an answer from her, and there is nothing that can be done about it. Deciding that enough is enough, they ask whether Daisy is ready for a reality check. Intending to snap her out of what they teasingly call her narcissism, they begin explaining the social structure aboard the Black Legato. Everyone aboard the airship belongs either to the nobility or the upper class. However, even within those groups, status is far from equal. Some noble families are treated with less respect than wealthy upper-class commoners, while certain commoners possess greater influence than many aristocrats. The reason, they explain, lies in the aftermath of the magic war. A family's prestige depends on whether they fought bravely in the war or remained silent, and whether they support the emperor or stand with Archduke Zinal. Political allegiance has become the defining factor behind every family's reputation, creating an enormous social barrier that few can ever cross. After finishing the explanation, they decide to test Daisy with a quick question. They ask which category Mr. Greyweatherwood belongs to. Daisy calmly replies that the answer is rather ambiguous. Her friends immediately agree. They explain that Greyweatherwood did indeed fight in the magic war, yet received no rewards afterward. Furthermore, because she has never been active in noble society, nobody knows whether she supports the emperor or Archduke Zinal. To make matters even more confusing, she freely associates with the children of wealthy upper-class commoners who are not even nobles. Considering all those circumstances, it is hardly surprising that everyone aboard the Black Legato has become curious about her true position. As Daisy quietly reflects on their explanation, she realizes that she has unintentionally created the perfect circumstances to serve as bait. However, she also understands that all her efforts will amount to nothing if neither Jean nor the mysterious client decides to take the bait. Just then, Daisy notices someone approaching her table. The newcomer quietly remarks that she appears to be holding an excellent hand, wondering whether she is the type of player who approaches every game with extreme caution. The moment Daisy hears the name Buckley Creighton, an uneasy feeling settles over her. Ever since her butler first mentioned that name, she had sensed deep down that events would eventually lead to this encounter. Now, standing before her, is the very person she had expected. The man politely introduces himself, expressing his pleasure at finally meeting her before revealing that he is Duke Jihark. Without a moment's hesitation, Daisy rises from her seat and respectfully introduces herself as Greyweatherwood. The sight before her brings back countless memories. Duke Jihark is not merely a distinguished noble. He is one of the masters who taught Daisy the way of the sword, as well as a trusted comrade who once crossed the boundary between life and death alongside her on the battlefield. Although she had always believed there was a chance they would meet again someday, she never imagined that reunion would take place aboard the Black Legato. With sincere respect, Daisy steps forward and formally greets him, feeling deeply honored to stand once again before the legendary Sword Saint. The appearance of Sword Saint Jihark stirs memories so deeply buried within Daisy that, for a fleeting moment, the present seems to blur with the past. There was once a time when she trained beneath his guidance, learning the sword alongside several other masters. Together with countless comrades, she crossed the boundary between life and death more times than she could remember. Those days remain vivid in her mind, treasured memories that have never faded despite the years that have passed. Because of that, seeing him again is strangely comforting, even under circumstances such as these. Jihark approaches her and requests a moment of her time. Daisy readily agrees, though she wonders whether speaking here is truly appropriate. Of all the sword masters she has ever known, he remains the only one whose thoughts she cannot read. Her current abilities are insufficient to peer into the depths of his mind, yet she can still sense something beneath the surface. Hidden within his refined and disciplined gaze is a singular point of killing intent, so sharp and concentrated that it sends a chill through her. She already knows the truth. The Sword Saint is the client. The realization has never left her mind. Without wasting time, Jihark reveals the purpose of his approach. He explains that Jean wishes to have a mock duel with her and asks whether she would be willing to teach his lacking daughter a lesson. The request immediately causes Daisy's thoughts to race. At last, the pieces begin to fit together. Now she understands why the Sword Demon serves as the head of that assassin guild. The Duke, known throughout the Empire as the Emperor's Sword, is bound by a treaty with the imperial family and therefore cannot maintain a private organization under his direct command. However, Jean has not yet inherited the title of Duke. As a result, she can be used as a puppet and intermediary as much as necessary. The truth becomes painfully clear: the Sword Saint himself is the client. More than that, he is the true master behind the guild, and for Daisy, this revelation represents the worst possible hand she could have been dealt. Before she can respond, one of her companions hurriedly steps forward, convinced that a misunderstanding has occurred. The man attempts to explain that Grey is not a swordsman at all. To support the claim, he points out Daisy's soft hands, insisting that they are hardly the hands of someone devoted to the blade. Jihark listens calmly before turning his attention back to Daisy. His expression remains unreadable as he silently questions whether that is truly her answer, as well whether she intends to claim that a duel is impossible simply because she is not a swordsman. Instead of showing hesitation, Daisy smiles. Then she accepts the request. However, her acceptance comes with two conditions. The first condition is that the mock duel must be conducted in complete privacy, without a single spectator present. The second condition is far more shocking. If Jean loses, she must be stripped of her succession rights. Daisy calmly explains her reasoning. Regardless of who emerges victorious, she has no desire for anyone to witness such a shameful side of either participant. Furthermore, she cannot tolerate the thought of a future duke who was defeated by a nobody like herself inheriting such a prestigious position. The declaration immediately sends a wave of whispers through the surrounding crowd. The atmosphere becomes charged with tension as nobles and onlookers exchange uncertain glances. At that very moment, Jean arrives. After hearing the proposed terms, the Duke asks whether she is willing to accept the Viscount Bywood's conditions for the wager. Without the slightest hesitation, Jean agrees. She declares that the Viscount's demands are perfectly reasonable and sees no issue with accepting them. With both sides in agreement, preparations are made to relocate to another venue in accordance with Daisy's wishes. As they move toward the designated location, Daisy withdraws her sword while remaining acutely aware of Jihark's presence. To her, he remains as unpredictable as ever. Then, during the journey, the Sword Saint unexpectedly calls out to her. He points out that the duel was arranged on short notice and suggests that she may not possess a suitable sword for the occasion. With that, he offers her his own blade to use. The gesture catches Daisy off guard. Nevertheless, she accepts the weapon and offers her thanks. As soon as she takes hold of the sword, Jihark studies her carefully. A faint curiosity appears in his eyes as he remarks that he feels as though they may have met somewhere before. The question causes Daisy's heart to skip a beat. Yet outwardly, she remains composed. She immediately dismisses the possibility, insisting that such a thing cannot be true because this is their first meeting. Although her response is calm, her mind is anything but. A sense of unease begins to grow within her. What exactly is he plotting? Why would he lend her his personal sword? The gesture feels far too deliberate to be simple kindness. Something about the situation is wrong. Every instinct she possesses warns her that there is more behind his actions than what appears on the surface. And above all else, she knows one thing with absolute certainty. She should not use this sword. Daisy decides to keep the matter as simple as possible. Rather than engaging in lengthy explanations or elaborate conditions, she presents Jean with a straightforward challenge. If Daisy can force Jean to draw her sword, then Daisy will be considered the winner. However, if Jean manages to draw her blade and swing it twice, then Daisy will be the one who loses. The terms are simple. The outcome will be decided almost immediately. The moment the duel begins, Jin's sword seems almost alive with fighting spirit. The blade practically roars with confidence, declaring that it is charging forward and that anyone standing in its path will be swept aside without mercy. Jean herself is equally determined. She refuses to back down and firmly rejects what she perceives as Daisy's kindness and leniency. Her pride as a swordswoman does not allow her to accept such treatment. With that, the duel begins. The instant their blades move, Jean feels a chill run through her body. Daisy is staring at her with eyes so sharp that they seem capable of killing. For a brief moment, Jean feels as though she is facing a veteran warrior from a battlefield rather than someone her own age. Yet before she can fully process that sensation, the match is already decided. Daisy effortlessly knocks Jin's sword away. The movement is so natural and precise that it appears almost casual. To Daisy, the action is second nature. After all, she has parried the Sword Saint's blade hundreds upon hundreds of times. Compared to the countless exchanges she experienced against Jihark, Jin's attack feels painfully familiar and predictable. The difference in experience is overwhelming. Before Jean can recover, Daisy closes the distance and lightly strikes the top of her head with her sword. Then she calmly points out what would have happened next. Her ankles would have been the next targets. After that, her wrists. Had those strikes been delivered seriously, Jean would have been left unable to walk without crutches. Her ankles would have been rendered useless, and her injured wrists would have prevented her from even holding a pen for an entire month. The implication is clear. The duel is over. Jean immediately admits defeat. Without making excuses or attempting to argue, she acknowledges that she has lost fair and square. True to her word, she declares that she will relinquish her position as successor just as promised before the duel. Hearing that, Daisy silently breathes a sigh of relief. Good. At the very least, the matter involving the butler and the Assassin Guild's request has been dealt with for now. The immediate crisis has passed. Once the duel concludes, Jean approaches Daisy again. There is no bitterness in her expression. Instead, there is only curiosity. She politely asks whether she may ask a single question. Daisy grants her permission. Jean then voices the question that has been troubling her ever since the duel ended. How could someone of Daisy's age possibly reach such a level? The sincerity in her voice makes Daisy pause. At that moment, Daisy realizes something important. Jean truly loves the sword. There is no arrogance in her question, nor any resentment. She simply wishes to understand. Because of that, Daisy finds herself willing to offer at least a small lesson. Unfortunately, there are some things she cannot explain. She tells Jean that she cannot provide the answers she is seeking. The reason she became strong so quickly is tied to experiences that ordinary people could never understand. They are experiences that accelerated her growth far beyond what should have been possible. However, that strength did not come without a cost. She paid a price for it. Jean immediately becomes intrigued and asks what that price is. For a moment, Daisy struggles to find an answer. Then she simply states that it is a secret. After all, how could she possibly explain the truth? How could she tell Jean that she had once died and then returned to life? That is not the sort of story anyone would believe. Jean accepts the answer, though only briefly. A moment later, she makes an even more unexpected request. Perhaps, she suggests, Daisy could take her on as a disciple. The proposal leaves Daisy completely speechless. Back in the present, the memory causes Daisy to internally groan. The sheer boldness of that girl still amazes her. Of all the people in the world, Jean had actually asked to become her disciple. The thought alone gives Daisy a headache. More importantly, she cannot even begin to imagine how she is supposed to teach the daughter of the Sword Saint. The situation is far too troublesome. For the time being, she decides that it would be best to avoid thinking about it altogether. Instead, she plans to spend some time with Lu and relax. Unfortunately, peace is not destined to last. The moment she arrives, an unbelievable sight greets her. Lu is currently sitting on top of a woman. The scene is so absurd that Daisy freezes on the spot. Lu notices her arrival immediately and casually remarks that she is late. Meanwhile, Daisy stares at the situation before her, unable to comprehend what she is seeing. Countless questions flood her mind at once. And above all else, one thought rises louder than the rest. What in the world is this supposed to be? Daisy finds herself completely baffled by the situation unfolding before her eyes. She cannot help but wonder what kind of absurd circumstance has led to a noble woman ending up unconscious in someone else's bed. The sight is strange enough on its own, but knowing that Lu is involved makes it even more suspicious. Unable to contain her curiosity, she turns toward Lu and casually asks whether he simply killed the woman. Lu immediately dismisses the notion, remarking that not everyone in the world is as extreme as Daisy. His response causes her to narrow her eyes in suspicion. She begins wondering whether the two of them are actually close enough that one can casually knock the other unconscious and drag them into a bedroom. Lu, however, questions whether Daisy is implying that he has cheated on someone or become involved in some scandalous affair. Daisy quickly waves away the accusation, explaining that she is merely joking. Even so, she cannot ignore the details before her. Unless Lu has somehow fallen for this woman, there should be no reason for him to have cancelled his transformation. A memory then surfaces in her mind. She recalls something Natasha once told her regarding transformation magic. While transformed, a mage cannot cast other forms of magic. In other words, the moment Lu cancelled his transformation, it means he had been forced into a situation where using another spell became necessary. That realization immediately leads Daisy to a troubling conclusion. She begins wondering whether the woman attempted to assassinate him. Lu calmly confirms that her assumption is correct. The answer causes Daisy's expression to stiffen. Her thoughts immediately drift toward the Sword Saint. She briefly wonders whether the woman was sent by him. However, she quickly suppresses the idea. It is still far too early to leap to conclusions without evidence. Instead, she decides to focus on what can actually be verified and asks Lu what motive lay behind the attack. Lu simply replies that he has no idea. Since the culprit is already present, he suggests asking her directly. After all, that is precisely why he personally brought her to the room instead of disposing of her elsewhere. As Daisy observes the unconscious noblewoman more carefully, she notices traces of mind control magic. The discovery leaves her speechless. Inwardly, she criticizes Lu for once again using forbidden magic as casually as if he were taking an oath. Lu, however, remains completely unconcerned. Since Daisy is so curious, he suggests that she conduct the interrogation herself. Accepting the invitation, Daisy turns her attention to the woman. She begins questioning her about the reason behind the attack. More specifically, she asks why the woman attempted to target Liu and the Viscountess and what objective she hoped to achieve. Under the influence of the mind control spell, the woman answers without hesitation. She reveals that she was not targeting the Viscountess at all. Her actual assignment was to monitor the noble council. The response immediately catches Daisy off guard. She stares at the woman in surprise, unable to hide her confusion. If the Viscountess was not the target, then the entire situation is far more complicated than she initially believed. Seeking clarification, she questions the woman further. The woman calmly repeats that her mission has always been surveillance of the noble council. Daisy then asks whether she is the only observer assigned to the task. The woman replies that there are 12 observers in total. That answer causes Daisy's concern to deepen considerably. 12 observers is not a small number. It suggests a large-scale operation rather than the actions of a lone infiltrator. She immediately asks whether the remaining 11 agents are also monitoring the noble council. The woman answers negatively. Daisy's eyes narrow. If they are not assigned to the noble council, then each observer must have a separate objective. The woman then reveals her own specific role. She states that she is responsible for handling preparations related to an illegal villa intended for a future terrorist attack. The room falls noticeably heavier after those words leave her mouth. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a completely different scene unfolds. Jean arrives before a closed door and quietly knocks. From inside, Jihark grants permission for her to enter. As she steps into the room, Jihark immediately studies her expression. What he sees is vastly different from what he had expected. Rather than anger, excuses, or stubborn resistance, Jean carries an air of resignation. Without wasting time, she approaches him and presents her sword. She then offers a sincere apology. Jihark accepts the weapon and slowly draws it from its sheath. The moment the blade emerges, his eyes widen. Numerous marks left behind by battle are visible upon the weapon. More importantly, those marks tell a story that only a master swordsman can understand. As he examines them, countless thoughts run through his mind. He begins wondering exactly how skilled Daisy truly is. The traces left upon the sword reveal a level of mastery that cannot be dismissed lightly. Yet what intrigues him even more is the nature of the swordsmanship itself. He cannot immediately determine whether the style belongs to a familiar school that he recognizes or whether it originates from something completely foreign to him. While he continues examining the blade, Jean lowers her head. She states that she was defeated fairly and completely. Because of that defeat, she intends to honor her promise. She will relinquish her right to succession and leave the family. Her declaration fills the room with silence. However, Jihark does not immediately accept her decision. Instead, he reminds her that he is the head of the household. A promise made between individuals is one matter, but whether she leaves the family is a matter that falls under his authority. Such a decision cannot be finalized before he understands everything that happened. For that reason, he decides to ask her once more. Holding the sword in his hand, he fixes his gaze upon Jean and returns to the question that interests him most. He asks her to describe the Viscount's swordsmanship. Jean quietly replies that she does not know. Her answer immediately causes Jihark to raise an eyebrow. He asks whether she truly means that she cannot describe the Viscount's swordsmanship because the Viscount never even drew a sword during their battle. The statement hangs heavily in the air. A moment later, disbelief crosses Jihark's face. He finds himself questioning how such a thing is even possible. Jean is claiming that she suffered defeat despite her opponent never drawing a blade at all. As he studies her expression, however, he quickly realizes that she is not lying. Jean has always been one of the most obedient among his children. Unlike some of the others, she rarely allows pride or emotion to cloud her judgment. More importantly, she possesses enough self-awareness to understand the difference between herself and true monsters such as Garrosh. She has never been the type to exaggerate either her victories or her failures. That very nature is what made her suitable as a clone master. She is disciplined, objective, and practical. She is also someone who desperately needs achievements and merit in order to secure her position within the family. Because of that, her current behavior feels unusual. Someone like Jean should have no reason to avoid answering his question. If anything, she should be explaining every detail she remembers in order to justify her defeat, yet she continues to evade the subject. The realization causes Jihark's eyes to narrow slightly. It seems that something unusual occurred between the two of them, something significant enough that Jean either cannot properly explain it or simply does not wish to. His attention then shifts toward the sword resting in his hands. Faintly, he can hear it speaking. The blade repeatedly urges its owner to continue training. The voice itself is not unusual. As far as he can tell, the sword is behaving exactly as it always has. Nothing about it appears corrupted or altered. Even so, he continues examining it carefully. A swordsman's blade inevitably retains traces of its master's experiences. Every clash, every strike, and every exchange leaves behind marks that can be interpreted by those skilled enough to read them, yet despite his inspection, he discovers nothing abnormal. The sword appears no different than it did before.